Hello, everyone, and welcome to Business Solves, our 2020 Corporate Citizenship Conference and Awards program. I'm Mark DeCourcy, the Senior Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and I lead the Chamber's Corporate Citizenship Center. Now, 2020 has been a year of tremendous change. We experienced a global pandemic that disrupted every aspect of our lives, from the way we work to the way we learn. The events of this year have challenged our communities and the businesses and workers that keep our nation running. It has also been a year of awakening, further opening our eyes to the systemic inequalities faced by millions of our fellow Americans. But 2020 has also demonstrated to solve. And over the next 3 days, we'll explore the possibilities that exist when businesses answer that call to lead. I encourage you to take advantage of the unique networking opportunities offered by our virtual platform to connect, to share, inspired. Additionally, our 21st Annual Citizens Awards will now take place as part of the conference program. So make sure to tune in throughout the 3 days to find out which companies will take home the top honors. I'd like to also thank our event sponsors for their generous support. Without them, our conference and awards program would not be possible. And now, it is my honor to begin today's programming by introducing Suzanne Clark. She's the president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. As the head of the world's largest business federation, Suzanne fiercely fights for businesses of all sizes to help create that environment where the businesses can innovate, where they can grow, and where they can serve society better. She's seen firsthand the power of business to solve our most pressing challenges. And we're so delighted she can join us today in conversation with Larry Fink, founder, chairman, and CEO of BlackRock, and perhaps one of the most consequential business leaders of our time. With that, please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Suzanne Clark.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks to all of you for joining the Foundation's Center for Corporate Citizenship Conference and Awards. This afternoon's discussions will focus on the many ways that businesses have and can continue to step up in the arena to take action to solve the greatest challenges facing our nation. In many ways, 2020 will mark a pivot point in our modern era, and it's up to the business community to ensure that the way forward out of this crisis leads us into a brighter future. Businesses everywhere share an opportunity to drive inclusive growth that lifts countries, communities, and people. And we share a burden to solve long-standing problems that have accelerated or been amplified this year. These are unprecedented challenges, but they present unparalleled opportunities. So often, the goodness of business is thought of in terms of corporate social responsibility, and CSR is often discussed as an add-on and thus not fundamental to the nature of business itself. What gets left out of the conversation is how business drives societal good, what a job means to an individual, a family, a community. It means health, security, opportunity, and prosperity. None of these things are possible without the jobs and income that employers pour into communities. Last year, some people were questioning the fundamental purpose of a business. This year, businesses have had the opportunity to demonstrate that purpose. And how have they responded? When the country locked down, businesses kept our lives running. Manufacturers of all kinds converted their operations to produce masks, hand sanitizers, ventilators, and more. Frontline workers and industries kept communities operating during the economic shutdown and pioneered ways of working in these difficult times. IT and healthcare companies kept us connected in a time of isolation, harnessing technology to enable remote learning and telehealth. And pharmaceutical companies are unified in their efforts to develop and deliver therapeutics and cures in a whole-of-industry effort, the likes of which we've never before seen. The pandemic has been a stark reminder of the fundamental contributions and innovations of business, and business across the country and across our economy are showing they can do well by doing good. I'm delighted to be joined today by a visionary business leader whose insights help shape our country's response to this crisis and will define our future beyond it. Larry Fink is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of BlackRock. Larry and 7 partners founded BlackRock in 1988, and under his leadership, the firm has grown into a global leader in investment and technology solutions. BlackRock's mission is to help investors build better financial futures, and the firm is trusted to manage more money than any other investment company in the world. Larry, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here, Suzanne.
So, we've certainly been talking a lot about the events of 2020 and how unprecedented they've been, and how the world was largely unprepared for such a crisis and this kind of level of change. But I'm curious how you've seen the business community step up, what's worked, what hasn't, and what more could business be doing?
Well, I would say in most crises, the business community comes together. And obviously, this is probably the largest crisis in our lifetimes. And I do believe the business community has shown more purpose than any time in my 44 years of business. I think business has done more in the United States than in any other country in the world today. We understand our responsibilities. Many businesses announced during COVID that they were not going to do any terminations at all, even with economic uncertainty. In fact, my company, we're up 4% in headcount this year. And so I do believe we understand what it takes. And as I write in my letters to different CEOs, and many of you who are in the audience, if you're going to have a resilient business model over the long term, and I'm not talking about a pivot here or a pivot there, but over the long run, the resiliency of that model, the resiliency of your long-term strategy really comes out. And we are certainly seeing in 2020 by equity market performance, the big winners and many losers. So I'm not trying to say it's perfect. And I think that's one of the big issues that's going to be confronting us in 2021 and onward, that this recession has created huge gaps in our social fabric. We've had, as I said, changes in how consumers consume. So right now, we are seeing how we lead business through Zoom calls. We're applying different techniques for medicine. And so what is remarkable is the human spirit and how we are adapting. And I think, Suzanne and everyone, we are better on the backside of COVID. We're adapting, we're resolving, we're improving as a species. I mean, I could tell you for somebody like myself, I never thought I could personally work at home. I didn't think I was capable. I'm not so bad at, maybe I work better when I'm in the office, and I am in the office 3 days a week. But we adapt, and this is the marvelous component of humanity. We adapt, we grow, we learn. But as I said, this great recession that we're living in because of the pandemic creates this unevenness. And this is what we're going to have to be focusing post-COVID. And these are some of the things that we're going to all have to work together and come together as a country.
If you think about pulling those ideas together of the hope that you see of how people and businesses have adapted during this crisis, as you think to getting to the other side, how do you think companies, or what should companies be doing in thinking about social impact and purpose, but also as a platform for articulating their strategy and managing risks?
Well, I think it's more than ever before. Companies have to be more transparent than ever before. I've asked in my 2020 CEO letter for all companies to report under SASB. Now, SASB is not a perfect mechanism, but it's the best we have at the moment. And if anybody out there can improve on SASB, I'm sure the organization would love to hear it. But at the moment, it does help us. And so since I wrote the letter, there's a 400% increase in companies reporting under SASB. Now, why is that important to me? And for all investors, because then we can understand how a company's social fabric of a company is dealing with it. We can see how purposeful they are in terms of issues around diversity, how purposeful they are around the whole structure of their organization. We can see their governance structure with great transparency. So I believe the process of transparency, and let's be clear, transparency was never a word businesses uttered 20 years ago. But through this transparency, We are becoming more engaged with our employees. We're more connected with our employees. And employees are one of your key stakeholders. Through transparency, you're more connected with your clients. And what we are seeing a transformation in how clients consume. Many, many people only want to consume with organizations they believe in. It's not, I don't think people consume blindly anymore, especially young people. And in this world of deglobalization, and I'm a proud globalist, so I'm going to say it first and foremost, but in a world of deglobalization, and we're seeing it in so many parts of the world right now. And if you're a global company, if you don't earn your license to operate in every country you're operating in, you will not have that purpose to operate in that country. So in the United States, we have to be American. We have to do everything we can to improve the future of our country. But in Mexico, we have to be Mexican and improve the future for Mexicans, and on and on and on. And for those companies who are focused on that purpose of their focusing on their employees and attracting the best and the brightest, focusing on their clients and trying to earn more share of wallet from their clients. And for those who are earning their license to operate in every community, their shareholders are the huge beneficiary of that, because when you execute that in the long run, you have very strong, durable profitability. And I think in COVID, we're seeing this very clearly. We're seeing the best companies who are able to perform in an industry where they could continue to work remotely, because there are some industries that are severely impacted by COVID, and it's hard to measure how successful those companies in those industries. But for many of the companies and industries, how we adapt, how we change, how we are trying to connect with our clients, we're proving our purpose more than ever before. And I do believe COVID is only going to accelerate our clients, our employees' desire for a stronger, more articulated business purpose.
I have a follow-up I want to ask you about that, but first let's bring in our first audience question.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fink. My name is Melissa Partridge, and I manage corporate and foundation relations for Babson College. As you may know, Babson College prepares and empowers entrepreneurial leaders who create sustainable economic and social value everywhere. We use your quotes regarding the inextricable link between profit and purpose to drive a new mindset in business. We thank you for your leadership. At our school, we strive to shape leaders to create economic and social value simultaneously. But do you believe corporate leaders know how to actually act on moving from a shareholder to a stakeholder model? How do you suggest they start? And how can educators like us best work with industry to achieve this mindset?
Well, what a wonderful question. So I don't think all CEOs and boards do understand this yet. And this is a mission. This is a long process. And I am so proud of how many businesses that are moving forward very quickly. And I write about long-term, and you framed the question appropriately about the long-term. We're not going to ask for miracles by any one company. Companies have to move forward. And I do believe the best companies are moving forward, and they're showing how they are more purposeful in their community. They're showing how they are more purposeful with their employees, and that then drives more client activity. And through that, you are building more durable profitability. And what I would also say, we are seeing a huge divergence in companies in the same industry, while having the leaders in the industry having a much higher PE than other companies in the same industry. I mean, I've never seen such a broad divergence of PEs. We're talking 20, 30, 40% divergence of companies in the same industry. And if you could look underneath each of those companies and see what is the reasoning for that divergence, the best companies are companies that are heavily engaged in their corporate purpose, driving their employees, driving their clients, and then earning that license to operate in all the communities. And you're seeing that through the profitability. And I believe this is becoming more and more real. I've had dozens of phone calls, Zoom calls with boards of directors. Before COVID, I had many, many annual meetings with many, many boards in person. And boards are more and more interested in how to drive this. They are more interested. As I said, this is not going to happen overnight, and I never expected this to happen overnight. But I truly believe we as a business community, we're improving, we're getting better. I believe more and more businesses understand the concept of inclusive capitalism, that we have to build capitalism for more. And that's being driven by the best voices. And the last thing I would say related to leadership. 10 years ago, and much earlier, I would say most leaders of businesses did not want to have a voice because we all thought clients didn't want to hear your voice. They wanted to buy your products. And I think it's changed so dramatically, and much of it has to do with each year we get more and more millennials in our workforce, and I do believe the millennials are changing their parents and how they drive and how they consume, and I do believe there's this transformation that's going on, that the greatest companies in our country, in our country and in the world are companies that are driving themselves with purpose. Their leadership has courage, conviction, and have the drive of willing to have a voice. And I believe that's what's necessary in this divergent world we live in. It's not about running away and hiding from your voice. And this divergent world is about having a voice. And I do believe when you have that voice and it connects with your clients, it may not connect with the far left or the far right. I'm not here to suggest that, but if it connects with your clients, and that's your job as a leader of a company, then you can drive this. And if you connect with your employees, you drive the attraction of the best and the brightest to your firm. And through that, you can really deliver. And then you can be those companies that are trading at a 20, 30% premium versus your peers. And that's what we see as an investor. And we're seeing this happening more and more in almost every industry.
So you talked a minute ago about how this recession has really had disproportionate impact, right, on different segments and different parts of the economy, and clearly on different groups of people. What's your view on what companies, perhaps together with government, should be focusing on to help grow the economy and kind of stimulate growth and provide stability?
Well, I think it's happening, but it's happening. We've seen dramatic job loss. And yet, over the coming months, we're seeing more and more hiring. This is the natural process in America, and I'm pretty proud of how rapidly the private sector in some areas are adapting. And keep in mind, we've seen 10 years of a technology trend truncate in 8 months. The uses of video conferencing. I don't believe any company is going to have 100% of their employees back in office ever again. We're changing how we work. We're changing our workforce, and we're adapting. Let me step back for a second and just frame it a little differently to Suzanne. We as an economy have been very dependent on monetary policy. And I want to thank our central bank and all the central banks for their boldness in stabilizing the global economies through aggressive monetary policy. But monetary policy creates unevenness in the economy, because monetary policy is a tool to monetize financial assets. With monetary policy, it elevates the prices of financial assets, equities and bonds. And so those who own equities or those who have a portfolio of long-dated bonds have benefited dramatically. Most Americans, other than maybe a small 401k, really don't connect with the equity market. And they did not enjoy that type of growth. And so if we want to create more evenness in our economic future, it has to be done through fiscal stimulus. And our government has been bold in fiscal stimulus. We had 2 stimuluses, but we really need in this interim period before we have this vaccination, one more targeted fiscal stimulus. And let's talk about what is happening. We have huge industries that are employing, in many cases, the lowest strata of income workers. The number, I can speak about New York. I'm not sure if this is true in New York, but the number one source of low income work is in hospitality and lodging. And we all know what's going on in hospitality and lodging. Yeah, and yet those workers slowly are filtering. They may be lost their job in hospitality and lodging, but they may be moving to working in homes, in home delivery, in terms of like the Home Depots and the Lowe's. We are consuming differently. We're not traveling. We're not going on vacations, but we're improving our home. We're building home offices. We're more reliant on technology. We're buying more computers. We're improving our kitchen because we're cooking more at home. There are so many wonderful things going on. And so the consumer behavior because of COVID has changed rapidly. Jobs take time to filter, but that's happening. And that's the power of our capitalism in this country. It is not perfect. It's far from perfect, but it is really working. And this is one of the most, if somebody told me we're going to have this type of problem in our economy, I would have thought it would have been far worse. And I would lastly say, as we are now on a Zoom call, and I'm told there's 1,500 people watching, could you imagine a pandemic 7 years ago when we didn't have this technology? Could you imagine where the economy would be if we could not find ways of connecting? And I would just speak about BlackRock. BlackRock has 100 offices in 30 countries. Today, BlackRock has 16,500 offices because the majority of my employees are working at home, and that's an office. And so, we're changing. And so we're all adapting, but the power of capitalism is alive and well. The power of societal changes is very rapid, and that's causing this unevenness. And until we have a future where we feel safe, many of those industries are going to be hard to be rebooted anytime soon. Because when we go and do things like cultural events or a business convention, the furthest thing from our mind is the safety and health. And we have to get back to that point that when we congregate, safety and health is not even on the top 10 list. And so even if we have this vaccination that seems to be, going to be coming in the next quarter or so, we still are not going to understand how long the antibodies work in a body. And so we still don't have that safety yet. And until we know that, I still think it's going to be slower for some components of our economy to change. But I would say, Suzanne, our behaviors have changed in many ways, and it may be for permanent reasons, but I would say some of this behavior change is so beneficial for humanity. As I said, I don't think business will be 100% back in office. Could you imagine your employees? I would say BlackRock's average employee has an average commute of an hour each way. Maybe it's 45 minutes, depending on the place. Could you imagine those employees would have found 2 hours of their day? That is a dream. That is a blessing. And so this is what I'm saying. We are adapting, we're growing, and we're going to have many blessings out of this. And it's going to be wonderful learning experiences, and we're going to be better for it.
Well, from your lips to God's ears. Let's bring in the next audience question, if we might.
Hi, my name is Emily Yu, and I'm with the de Beaumont Foundation out of Bethesda, Maryland. So my question has to do with the connection and interdependence of business and community health. Peter Drucker once said, "A healthy business can't exist in a sick society." The pandemic has shown us what happens when we as a nation underinvest in public health, things like education and employment opportunities, access to transportation and healthy housing and the like. So moving forward, how can business invest in not only employee health, but community health as well, to ensure the prosperity of not only the private sector, but also the communities with which they are connected to? Thank you.
Well, I would say very clearly, this is not a question just for public companies. This has to be a question for all private companies too. And every leader of every company, public and private, has to ask themselves, are they doing everything they can for their employees? I would say one of the great transformations in healthcare, and I am the co-chair of a major medical center in New York City, one of the great blessings that we're learning from COVID, we're delivering healthcare differently. We're delivering healthcare via Zoom calls or WebEx or whatever mechanism we're doing it. So we're creating quicker, deeper connection between doctor and patient. And that is going to lower the cost of healthcare. Now, related to the community needs, each business has to earn their license to operate in their community, whether the community is a suburb or a rural area or a community in a city. And we have to play a role to help improve our citizens where we operate and where we work. The first commitment, though, that we all have, and I don't believe all companies are as committed, we have to find ways of helping improve the quality of healthcare for our employees. And this is one of the reasons, getting back to purposeful companies, if you are not working with your employees and helping your employees feel safe, especially in a COVID world, if you're not working with your employees to help them, give them as much access and information on healthcare, if you're not advancing different technologies like virtual healthcare components, companies are not doing enough. I would love that we have a world in front of us that all companies, small and large, public and private, are all trying to drive more and more of the healthcare needs of their employees. That's what we need to be doing. And if we could all do that, we would actually have less dependencies on our public sector in terms of what they are doing. Our public sector is going to be very, very challenged. Let's be clear, especially in cities where COVID, especially in cities that still are trying to make sure that health and safety is good in their public transportation. And so I don't think there's things that we could be doing in our community as much as making sure we're doing everything we can for all our employees. And for the large companies, we're making sure that all our suppliers are doing whatever they can do. And this is going to be a very important component of how we are leading and leading with purpose, making sure that we are trying to drive more inclusiveness, inclusive in capitalism, but more inclusiveness in healthcare.
Thank you for that. I know we only have a few more minutes, so I want to bring in the final audience question if we could.
Michael Jacobson, the president and CEO of the Greater Arlington, Texas Chamber of Commerce. Larry, COVID-19 has challenged us all. The U.S. Chamber and chambers across the nation are here to support the business community during this unpredictable time. What advice would you have for businesses that may be struggling themselves to keep their focus on a greater purpose?
Oh gosh, that's a really hard question for those companies that are just trying to stay afloat. Those businesses that are in the aggregation of humans, whether it's a convention center or that small business, restaurant that's across the street from a convention center, and or everything that is connected to culture and museums and. The most important thing is that you're thinking long term. We are, and this is one of the huge blessings of humanity, we're finding solutions very rapidly for COVID. I mean, the announcements in the last week of a 95% success ratio in providing antibodies for COVID is an extraordinary achievement, maybe the most important achievement we've ever incurred in our lifetime medically. As we know, we have a seasonal flu vaccination. At best, it's 40 to 60% successful. So to get something like COVID-19 to have having antibodies that protect you through a vaccination, that is a magnificent blessing. And if that's the case, this is going to be fully distributed over the coming quarters. And through that process, we as human beings, we want to aggregate, we want to close, we want to mingle, we want to learn, we want to adapt. And so those industries that are being impacted now, you can see that we are going to be behind this disease. Maybe in 6 months or 9 months. We may not feel totally safe yet because that takes more psychological time. The issue that we do have is before that, we are in a raging virus increase as we speak right now. Now, the positive side is we're able to deal with it better. We're seeing mortality rates under 1% right now because we're able to deal with it better than we did in March. But that's still too much. I mean, when you think about the seasonal flu, that has a mortality rate of 0.2%. So for the businesses that are having a hard time cope, I would just say try to do as much as you can, much as you want to do. Stay connected with your employees, stay connected with your clients, and within time, we are going to see an improved outlook on COVID, which means we as human beings, we're going to be dancing in the street.
I definitely look forward to that day. Larry, we can't thank you enough for being with us today. You've really given us a lot to think about, a lot of inspiration, and you've reinforced a lot of the Chamber's deeply held beliefs in our own shared purpose. It reminds me of a conversation we had with Dr. Fauci this summer when he told us, quote, "The business community is so essential to everything we do, even our health. To have a healthy community, you have to have a healthy business community." And, I think we're optimistic together because businesses are lifting us up, they're moving us forward, and we're optimistic because we believe in business and we believe in science. And I think you so rightly said, and it was inspirational to hear you say it, that we believe in the American people and the American system. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and the private sector is leading us all towards it. And I think, to your point, we can evolve and grow along the way. So we really appreciate you being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Suzanne. Stay safe, please. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
The U.S. Chamber created the Corporate Citizenship Awards to be able to tell the story of businesses doing good to make the world a better place.
The Citizens Award represents the pinnacle of success when it comes to creating meaningful programs.
All of the awardees and those that were nominated and reached the finalists were companies that had a very clear vision, very clear goals, clear measurable impact.
There's so many areas of communities that can be improved, from health to environment, logistics. The private sector truly is coming together to create these tremendous partnerships that are making a difference in the world.
When we won the Citizens Award, it brought us a lot of notoriety for our company, which wasn't otherwise terribly well known. It created a lot of pride with our employees to get that external affirmation that the work we were doing was truly meaningful.
We encourage all companies to demonstrate the great work that you're doing in social responsibility, because the private sector is critical to a better world.
Most organizations don't do the work for recognition and awards, but that is a nice way of measuring the success of our work and how we are benchmarking against other organizations.
The work that they're doing day in and day out is being recognized by one of the largest business organizations in the whole world.
When you bring home that trophy, you're saying to your company, look, our work is best in class.
Hello again, everybody. I am delighted to be back to introduce you to the Citizens Awards, which is our corporate awards program and celebration that has been historically held at the end of the Chamber Foundation's annual Corporate Citizenship Conference. For those of you who are hearing about this program for the first time, or among the tens of thousands who have applied, participated, or attended the annual ceremony, the Chamber Foundation created the Citizens Awards 21 years ago to honor the best in corporate citizenship. And while 2020 has shown the remarkable power of business to solve, this is not a recent trend, but an evolution of corporate giving and corporate purpose. The Chamber Foundation has been documenting this progression, and its history can be told no better than our Citizens Awards program. To mark the 20th anniversary of the Citizens Awards last year, the Chamber Foundation established the Corporate Citizenship Hall of Fame. Corporate Citizenship Hall of Fame identifies and commemorates companies and their leaders, their employees, and their cross-sector partners for their decades-long commitment and extraordinary contributions to the betterment of society. The inaugural Hall of Fame inductees included Cisco, DSM, GSK, Merck, and UPS. And this year, we are honored to induct two new Hall of Famers, the Citi Foundation and FedEx. I can confidently say that together, these 8 companies brought about a new era where corporate purpose is the foundation for progress and set an example for the rest of the sector. You can learn more about the Corporate Citizenship Hall of Fame and its 2019 and our new 2020 inductees Citi Foundation, and FedEx right now on the Business Solves platform. I encourage you to check out the impact they have made all over the world. Once again, congratulations to our 2020 inductees, Citi Foundation and FedEx. I'll now turn it over to our new Hall of Famers so they can tell you a bit more about their corporate citizenship journey and how they got to where they are today.
So what does CSR mean to FedEx? Well, at FedEx, we believe that corporate purpose goes far beyond profit. Our more than 500,000 team members show up every day to connect people with possibilities, whether it's a small business owner with a new customer, communities with first aid and fresh water after a natural disaster, or even more recently, hospitals, providing them with life-saving PPE in the midst of this global pandemic. To us, a dedication to purpose means awareness of the vast influence of our company. And it's our role as a large company in a much larger ecosystem that includes our team members' well-being, the vitality of the communities where we work, social movements like the fight for racial justice, and the natural environment that surrounds us. So corporate social responsibility means taking all of this into account and being intentional about how we can be a force for good across every stakeholder we influence.
At the Citi Foundation, we've spent the past 20 years building a community investment vertical in our company, and I think many other companies have done the same. We've been professionalizing staff, increasing the financial and human capital available to support our community programming and approaches, and we've been better defining our targets and our results. But I think now we need to also work horizontally across our companies to enhance and scale these efforts by leveraging our core business capabilities and taking a hard look at how our company's internal policies and practices can impact or contribute both positively and negatively to society. Corporate citizenship today, more than ever, is really about taking a stand on the things that we will do to drive positive societal impact. And we, as corporate citizenship professionals, need to play a role in also working with our companies to make sure that we stop doing the things that detract from that positive societal impact. I think the future of CSR looks very different these next 20 years compared to the past 20 years. I think if I look back, we've played the role of an engaged community problem solver, listening, learning, responding to community stakeholders. But today, more than ever, and certainly going forward, we need to now be community change agents ourselves. Our companies may not always take positions or focus on issues that everybody agrees with universally. And I think if 2020 has made anything clear to all of us, there is very little consensus in our society. But sitting on the sidelines is no longer going to be an option in the CSR field going forward. And I think that when we look back in another 20 years, the companies that figured out how to get comfortable being uncomfortable and stepping off of the sidelines are the ones that are going to be the most admired, the most sustainable.
So looking ahead at FedEx, there is certainly a lot of work to do, but we are up for the challenge. We are in the midst of our FedEx 50 by 50 campaign, which is our effort to positively impact 50 million people around the world by our company's 50th anniversary in 2023. Each day, we prioritize keeping our frontline team members safe. And as our network prepares to ship COVID-19 vaccines all around the globe, we are also reimagining ways for our people to safely lend their time and expertise to the community through virtual volunteering. We also plan to spend a lot of time listening to the people in our communities we seek to help, civic leadership, the nonprofits we support, and to our team members to better understand the challenges they face, and then work together on tangible and sustainable solutions. We have exciting work planned to help women and minority-owned small businesses around the world grow their revenues and create new jobs, to advance cleaner, more sustainable technology for the logistics sector, and to be a champion for inclusion in our communities. I'd invite everyone to visit FedExCares.com and sustainability.fedex.com to learn more. It's an honor to be part of the Citizenship Hall of Fame, and we appreciate all of the great work that all of you do every day.
Hello, my name is Gina Clark. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. I have the honor of serving as the president of the AmerisourceBergen Foundation, a role that is very close to my heart. Since our establishment in 2014, the AmerisourceBergen Foundation has been committed to making investments in local communities to improve the health and well-being of humans and animals around the globe. It is what motivates us every day, and it is ingrained in everything we do. From our work to combat the opioid epidemic through safe disposal, prevention education, and innovative solutions, to supporting access to health care for underserved populations, and in our disaster response efforts, the Foundation has worked with more than 100 nonprofits in 2019 alone to create a sustained and global impact. This year, we had an even greater opportunity and responsibility to fulfill our purpose of creating healthier futures as the pandemic took its toll on everyone. To have any impact on addressing a health emergency, we believe that you must partner with like-minded not-for-profits to share resources and knowledge to reach those local communities. That is why the AmerisourceBergen Foundation donated more than $1 million in emergency grants to pandemic response efforts to more than 20 nonprofits, including AmeriCares, Direct Relief, and Healthcare Ready. This allowed organizations to concentrate on the communities hardest hit by the pandemic. We also paid specific attention to organizations that were focused on providing support to diverse communities and give that support in a targeted and culturally responsive way. And while we're proud of where we focus our efforts, we know there is much more to be done. And we will continue to support those most affected by COVID-19 by addressing health disparities and strengthening our own diversity, equity, and inclusion focus, both inside and outside our organization. Today, I am honored to be joined by two colleagues to discuss how, through collaboration, our organizations have been able to meet critical healthcare challenges in underserved communities by supporting local sites of care, like pharmacies, and addressing the mental health needs so prevalent in the lives of our healthcare professionals during this time. So first, I'd like to welcome Tara Waters, Director of Business Development for AmeriCares. Tara manages strategic partnerships for emergency programs and U.S. programs, and she's also critical in evolving those partnerships into long-term collaborative relationships, evident by the 15-plus year partnership between AmeriCares and AmerisourceBergen. I've come to know and appreciate Tara over the last few years, and it is a pleasure to welcome her today. I am also thrilled to be joined by Chichi Moma, Chief Operating Officer at Springfield Pharmacy, located just outside of Philadelphia. As an independent community pharmacist, Chichi is not only a critical member of the business community in Springfield, she is also one of the most accessible healthcare providers in her community. As a frontline worker, Chichi and her team have worked tirelessly to ensure their patients continue to get the care they need in the face of a pandemic and to serve that community in new and innovative ways. Chichi and Springfield Pharmacy is part of the AmerisourceBergen's Good Neighbor Pharmacy Network, which includes thousands of community pharmacies across the nation, providing such valuable care during this time. So welcome to Chichi. I'm so proud to have you here, Chichi.
Thank you.
And with that, let's dive in. I'm going to throw this first question to Chi-Chi, but Tara, I'd love for you to add on as well. Chi-Chi, we know this has been an unprecedented time globally, and COVID-19 has taken its toll physically, mentally, and economically. From your vantage point, how has the COVID-19 pandemic especially impacted healthcare workers and health professionals such as yourself and your colleagues?
First of all, I'd like to say that we are burnt out. We are every day trying to figure out ways to adapt with what is going on in our nation and in the world, and being able to be flexible and still accessible to our communities. Healthcare workers, I call superheroes. And no matter how tired you are every day, you still have to put that cape back on and go out there and be accessible to your patients. The cost of working and not working has increased. The cost of just running a pharmacy or running a business has increased. We have had to pivot every day different ways to make healthcare accessible to our patients, whether it is increase in delivery, increase in telehealth or telemedicine, curbside deliveries. And I mean, our communities expect us to be open, and they expect their medications to be readily available. And it does not matter how physically or mentally tired we are, we still have to show up for them every day.
You know, Chi-Chi, I know we all have seen pictures of us all rightfully applauding the doctors and the nurses, and they are doing tremendous work. But as you just described it, you guys are too, and you are receiving our applause every day, even if you can't see it. But I know that mental health strain that you reference is something that matters deeply to Americans. And Tara, I'd love to hear you speak about how you believe that COVID has impacted healthcare workers and health professionals.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gina. So, Gina, as you know, AmeriCares is a health-focused humanitarian organization. So supporting frontline health workers like Chi-Chi has been a longstanding priority for us. Over the last many months, as we have worked to put PPE into the hands of health workers who were unsure where their next mask was going to come from, we have heard so many stories of feelings of stress and anxiety and exhaustion, like Chi-Chi is mentioning, and loss. We have one health worker who told us he's the father of 8, and he's unable to relax. He is always on alert, afraid of bringing the virus home to his family. And we've spoken to those that have lost coworkers, and one in particular just said to us, the grief is real, and it's just one day at a time for her. So, health workers deserve our support, and through, as you mentioned, AmeriCare's mental health programming and other interventions, we're giving them the tools they need to maintain their own health and continue to care for patients. But I want to note too, like Chi-Chi, I can tell the health workers that we work with are so resilient, and they are driven by this calling to serve, even throughout the pandemic. So AmeriCares, as you know, Gina, runs clinics down in Colombia serving the Venezuelan migrant population. And a couple of our staff down there, I was speaking with them recently, and one said that, he told us that working at AmeriCare's clinic is really the best thing that has ever happened to him. And though he fears contagion, he's concerned, of course, but that caring for patients is what boosts him. And, I believe you're superheroes too, Chi-Chi. One of our colleagues refused to be called a hero, as so many of you guys do. And instead he said he's an instrument, and that he took an oath and it's his duty. So, we believe that despite our colleagues' humility, that health workers are heroes. And I just want to note that in addition to those serving in the pharmacies and those in the ICUs and in the testing centers and testing sites, I just want to draw attention to those that are serving in the free and charitable clinic too. These are the ones serving the uninsured and the underinsured. And Gina, you mentioned the economic toll of COVID. So these safety net clinics are caring for the essential workers and the homeless and the newly unemployed. And as was mentioned earlier today, with the recent job losses, these clinics are seeing an increase in the number of patients, some 4 times over. And, these clinics, they're nonprofits. They have volunteer staff, limited budget, limited access to PPE, and they rely on AmeriCares and by extension, AmerisourceBergen and our other donors to keep their doors open. And, as Gina, you mentioned, keeping the doors open on these clinics is so critical to promoting health equity and access and inclusion in this country. And so as we think about the toll on health workers around the world, I just invite us to remember the safety net sector as well and the compounding pressures they're under.
Wow, Tara, particularly the safety net comment, so very real in our world, and maybe something others don't always think about. And I want to kind of ask a related question, Tara, to you, but I'll also say that I already see great questions coming in through the chat. So we will get to those, everyone. We're going to kind of save them toward the end so we can be sure and organize them well. But thank you. Please keep sending those questions. And Tara, just to extend a little bit on what you were saying, at AmerisourceBergen, and we referenced our partnership, we have been working closely with organizations like yours, really embedded in the communities to try to quickly expand access to quality care. We all know there are health care disparities, and they are real and they are tragic. During COVID-19, can you speak to what this support has meant to AmeriCares, and how has it helped you make an impact? We want all these companies to go do the same kind of thing. So how is this helping?
Absolutely. Well, yes, the early support of key strategic partners like AmerisourceBergen has been critical to AmeriCare's ability to scale up and to launch a coordinated global response to COVID. So for this work, we are grateful. But when I consider what is unique about our partnership and what has really elevated our impact during COVID, I think of a few things. The first is flexible funding. So Gina, you came to us, you said, here's COVID funding, put it where you need it most. And, this is always helpful, but during COVID, it was critical. It's been critical because it enables us to pivot and address the areas of greatest need, which, as Chi-Chi can attest to, has been changing and evolving over the course of the pandemic and continues to do so. So that flexible funding has been so important. The second factor that I think has actually elevated our impact is actually AmerisourceBergen's commitment to our non-COVID programming. So, during the course of the pandemic, AmerisourceBergen renewed and deepened its multi-year commitment to AmeriCare's U.S. Behavioral Health Initiative. And right now, that is so important to ensuring that underserved populations have access to care for chronic illness like diabetes and hypertension, and in this case, mental health. This is an important part of responding to COVID. So with partners like yourself, AmeriCares is working to ensure that these vulnerable populations are not suffering from or dying from preventable and treatable illness as a result of an overburdened health system. So the flexible funding and that ongoing support are so important. And then finally, I would say the third factor that's really elevating our impact is the annual core support that AmerisourceBergen provides to AmeriCare's emergency programs team. So right now, that reliable funding has enabled us to respond across 26 countries to COVID-19, but also to respond to the wildfires out west and a record-breaking hurricane season and the typhoons in the Philippines and all the other natural disasters right now. And COVID-19 is complicating response and recovery efforts around the world. And this reliable funding has really enabled us to have the readiness to respond. So, taken it holistically, I do believe it's that multifaceted, multi-year support that has actually elevated our COVID impact. So, we are grateful and we couldn't do it without you.
Well, thank you very much. And it is truly our honor to do this. And as you kind of detailed all the things happening in 2020, because it has been tragic with COVID, but there have been so many other things going on. Our responsibility to work with organizations such as AmeriCares is one we take profoundly and take very seriously. I want to ask one question now, additionally to you, Tara, and then Chi-Chi, I've got a big question coming up for you next. But Tara, you kind of touched on this a minute ago, the mental health aspect of all of this, and I kind of mentioned it earlier as well. Those are dramatic, the mental health aspects on the frontline workers, such as Chi-Chi referenced, and then those of us that are just trying to keep it all together every day and take care of our jobs and our families. I think those frontline workers have the biggest job and the toughest time. Tell us more about your efforts to address those.
Certainly. So providing mental health and psychosocial support to COVID-19 frontline health workers has been a priority of our response. As you know, Gina, mental health is a core expertise area at AmeriCares. So to support COVID-19 health workers, we were able to really leverage this expertise and years of experience to really build out and develop a COVID mental health training program for health workers to help them manage their fear, their stress, their anxiety, so that they can maintain good mental health and continue to care for their patient population. So the topics that we cover include things like stress management and self-care, but also dealing with grief and loss and how to navigate stigma and discrimination and implicit bias in a COVID context. We also provide the health workers with the tools that they need to really identify and address mental health needs in their patient population. This is through offering psychological first aid or special modules on helping children and adolescents deal with grief and loss during COVID. We offer one-on-one counseling for acute crisis management and also group sessions where health workers can hear from one another and learn from one another. So to date, we've received some really great feedback where participants are saying that the workshops have really validated their emotions and given them peace of mind. One participant in particular, she said that attending the workshop helped her find herself again. She said that amidst this intense routine of work and school, work and home and family and potentially school, caring for her family, that she really forgot about being. And she thanked us in the end by simply saying, "Thank you for the space." Thank you for the space. You mentioned, Gina, that how it affects all of us. And, that concept just makes me exhale thinking about it. So to date, we are grateful for the opportunity to support health workers. And we've so far trained about 12,000 participants in COVID-specific mental health, and we're only just getting started. We're launching an online learning platform where all of our content will be housed for health workers around the world to access. It'll be open access, so whether you're a provider in rural US or a community health worker in Haiti, you can access this information. And the vision is really to put those skills in the hands of health workers who would otherwise not have access to that knowledge, build their resilience, their capacity to serve, and ultimately improve health outcomes for marginalized communities all around the world.
That is such an amazing and outstanding program. I have to believe, Chi-Chi, that was hitting close to the heart for you and your colleagues. You are again on a front line, and it is our community pharmacies and our neighborhood pharmacies. You know that those are near and dear to my heart in AmerisourceBergen, and I believe so much in what all of you do. Can you talk a little bit about that role during COVID and the role that the pharmacists are playing specifically?
We are educators and we advocate for patients. I mean, and neighborhood pharmacies deal with a lot of culturally diverse population. And the patients, they love to feel seen, they love to feel heard, and that is what makes our job very fulfilling. And during these unprecedented times, patients have a lot of questions, there's a lot of anxiety. They will ask, Chi-Chi, what do you think about the COVID vaccine? Would you take it? I can't answer questions personally. I have to make sure I answer the questions with facts. So we have to not only be educators and advocate for these patients, we have to make sure that we're in tune with what is going on in our world and make sure we answer the questions with facts. And these patients are not only relying on us to help them get access to their medication, but also making sure they get the right medication at the right time. I mean, we partner up with AmerisourceBergen because in the beginning of the pandemic, it was very difficult to get most COVID essential items or products. And having a vendor relationship that knows how to allocate these products for every pharmacy in all these communities to have access to the products on time and have enough of it on time is very critical for us. You know, we're worried about drug-drug interaction, and at the same time, we're worried about getting our hands on the product at the right time. So it is it is a lot for us, being able to be flexible, being able to adapt, being able to stay informed of the facts, and being able to be there for our communities and meet them right where they are, and explaining things to them at their level and being accessible to them when they need it.
You know, you hit on such an important point, Chi-Chi, there, and I'm gonna be a little risky here because I'm proud of our pharmacies everywhere, our chain pharmacies and our community pharmacies. But I would tend to think that our community pharmacies probably have a little bit of a different role. If it's okay to use the word, a little more intimate with your customers. I mean, you're their pharmacist, you're their medical guide, you're their friend. Maybe talk a little bit about that unique role of the community pharmacist.
You get to know these patients intimately, like I say. You meet a grandma, for example, you know about her children, her grandchildren. You celebrate their holidays with them. You don't even really have to be from the same culture or background, but we celebrate everybody together. So they become part of our family, it's what we call it. And they expect to see me there or see the rest of my team there when they come in. And it gives them a sense of security. It gives them a sense of belonging. And it becomes their pharmacy, their pharmacist. It's an extension of their home. And for them to understand what the other healthcare providers are telling them has to come through us, has to come through our pharmacy. So we become the liaison between them and the other healthcare providers, liaison between them and the insurance companies. It's like we are jack of all trades. I hope we're master of all of them, but we are a jack of all trades.
Well, having my own community pharmacy just a few blocks away, you just described it perfectly. So, and it's kind of like walking into my healthy cheers, if you will, because it's always like, Gina, welcome, glad to see you. So thank you for that. And maybe one more question specifically to you, Chi-Chi, and then we've got some great questions in the chat, so I'll go to some of those. But, AmerisourceBergen, you referenced it, we're embedded in the supply chain, so we live and breathe that every day. And I've been so proud of our distribution centers and the extra work they've been putting in trying to make sure that you do get what you need to serve your patients. How, from your point of view, how has the supply chain been impacted from the pandemic? And, everybody wants to know what you think about the vaccines that are coming. What are your thoughts?
From a supply chain standpoint, in the beginning of the pandemic, it was rough. It was very, very hard for us to plan ahead, for us to project how many products we need to get in to serve the population that we have. But AmerisourceBergen was very good with being able to balance it out. That's why the word allocation comes in, where they allocate a certain amount per distribution center, per region, per community, per pharmacy, based on our buying habits, right? And we also being able to buy certain things from different distribution if the demand is there. And yes, a lot of people do ask me about the COVID vaccine. And our community pharmacies, mostly independent pharmacies, are well equipped. I mean, using the flu vaccines, for example, independent pharmacies offer high flu shots than most doctors' offices, and the providers in the area are able to channel their patients to us because we see them first. We have a relationship with them. We can convince them to get the shot better than other people in the doctor's office. So, and I believe that as pharmacists, we are equipped to be able to help vaccinate everyone for the COVID vaccine. And we're ready. We're preparing, we're ready. We are filling out the necessary documents that we need to, but we are ready to help the community, to help our patients, to help America get this together.
Thank you, Chi-Chi. It's just so very meaningful as we are now beginning to see those lights at the far end of the tunnel, knowing that there's a partnership and the passion with which you and your colleagues and pharmacists take their role in getting those vaccines out to everyone, getting those very important shots. So we have a few minutes left and we have some questions. I'll take a couple that came to me just to give Tara and Chi-Chi a chance to catch their breath, grab some water. So if I look over here, I've got a question about, as a foundation, how would I like to see change and how companies share or talk about their CSR efforts as it pertains to nonprofit or philanthropy? Well, I could talk an entire 30 minutes on this, but I won't. I'll talk just briefly and say, doing what we're doing right now. So I think that having very transparent, open conversations about what we do, the work we do with AmeriCares, the work we do with even smaller nonprofits like Family Reach, who serves the families of cancer patients, or Aluna, who serves the families of children of families of addiction or death. We talk all the time. We get out of there and talk about those particular efforts. I mean, all of us want to continue to help stand up and support the big organizations because they are doing good work. And they struggle during this time too. The American Cancer Society, the American Heart Association, everybody's been impacted by COVID and their fundraising. But these efforts that we're talking about today, I think that us getting out and taking every opportunity to talk about them in detail, to talk about the mental health offerings of AmeriCares, to talk about the partnerships that our pharmacies have with us to address community needs. That's what is most important. And even as recently as last week, our board, while telling me we're proud of what you are doing with the Foundation of AmerisourceBergen, we don't think you're talking about it enough. We think that the world needs to hear this. It's what inspires us all to go the next step, and you need to be talking about it and talking about it at a level of detail that people can turn around and embed that in their own practices. So I hear that, and I will continue to try to tell our story with partners such as Chi-Chi and Tara. So thank you for that great question.
Could I just add?
Please go, Tara.
One comment to that, and that this is just to shed light on the great work that you guys are doing. I think one thing that you guys do exceptionally well from a CSR perspective and sustainability perspective is you bring your nonprofit partners together. I think it's really incredible and unique how you bring us together to learn from one another, to partner with one another. The number of partnerships that have been born out of your conferences is just incredible. Hey, I'd love to extend our mental health support services to Chi-Chi's staff and her partners, right? And so I think that is exceptional the way you do it, and I think it's a model for other companies as well.
Well, thank you, Tara. And kind of a quick comment to that, and then Chi-Chi, I'm going to throw a question to you. We've done our foundation conference that Tara mentioned a couple of years. This year, clearly, we had to do it virtually, and we were like, wow, how are we going to pull this off virtually, like we all worried about in the early days, right? So what we did, I have a tremendous team led by Susan Lorenz Fisher at our foundation office, and we were able to create a virtual day-long conference, much like we're doing here. And just as Tara's describing, it was amazing to watch, even in the chats during different presentations, people connecting and saying, let's get together after this, or I've got a way we can work together to address this small community challenge. Collaboration is almost always the key to solving problems. So Chi-Chi, kind of a pivot into another subject. The question is, how has COVID-19 affected your vendor relationships, and how do you support each other? I hope you're going to say that it gets better, but please speak the truth. How has it affected it?
Our relationship with our vendors we need our vendors to keep our doors open. That's the truth, right? And during this pandemic, I believe it's a relationship that's gotten stronger because we constantly are having communication, because communication is important. We're constantly dialoguing and trying to figure out how they can best serve us better and how we can stay compliant as well to be able to have access to what we need. There's been challenges on how accessible things are, yes, it's worldwide and it is affecting everybody, but AmerisourceBergen has really been great to us in giving us what we need when we need it. Yes, the cost of things have gone up, but that is across everywhere, not just the medication, even the grocery stores, but just that communication, keeping that, and also training. AmerisourceBergen have been rolling out some trainings on how to help each of us operate at the top of our license, is what I call it, right? So that has really been very, very important for us. So we're not in it alone. We feel like we're not alone, that we have the support that we need, because we need the vendors to do what we do best.
Yeah, Chi-Chi, you mentioned something that I think is so important. And for those of you listening that don't know the phrase operating at the top of their license, is I'll just lobby for something here. I think it is so important for our pharmacists to be able to do this. It is how they can better deliver care at the community level. So if you don't know what it is, we won't use time to try to explain it. Go look it up. It's important. It's very important. Guys, we've got so many great questions. I may not get to all of them, but I'm going to try to hit one that you kind of opened up the dialogue on, Tara, and that's really around the social safety net. And I think it's a question probably I'll ask you to address, and then I'll try to speak to it from our perspective as well. And the question is, with regard to the social safety net, particularly with regard to healthcare and food insecurities, both exponentially increasing, how are you rethinking your approach with regard to partnerships such as ours, and also how individuals can better connect? So I know, Tara, this is a passion of yours and AmeriCare's. If you want to start, and then I'll add a couple of thoughts.
Sure. Well, I think that as I had mentioned earlier, that health equity and access for marginalized communities is actually core to our mission. It is what we are about. It has been core to our mission for a long time. So I don't know that we're necessarily changing that. I think we are doubling down on that and making sure that all communities have access to health. I think, COVID has definitely shed light on health disparities in our country. And so that is an area that we are continuing to support with AmerisourceBergen's support as well. And we see this as a global mission for communities all around the world that are disadvantaged or are discriminated against, and making sure that they have access to care is just critical.
I'll just add to that I think one of the things we've tried to do this last year, and particularly during these last few months, is try to use every demographic research support vehicle that we could to help target this support. I mean, we had general, good direction to go there, but we've really gotten very specific to be able to go into areas that need it the most. So if it's, perhaps to your point, Tara, it's not rethinking our approach, it's doubling down, it's refining our approach, it's getting laser focused on where we can make the most impact in the shortest amount of time. And I think you're going to continue to see us do that. So I do know we are now really going to be running out of time soon. So I will just say thank you to all of you. We have more questions, so maybe one day the Chamber of Commerce will invite us all back to continue this discussion. But this has been a great dialogue. Chi-Chi with you, Tara with you. Many thanks to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for providing this venue to have this conversation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to our host, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
At CSX, we believe in serving those who serve. That's why we launched Pride in Service, our signature program focused on connecting military, veterans, first responders, and their families to the community resources and financial support they need, when and where they need it. It's our way of saying thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Geeta Ramprasad, and I'm a vice president at Feeding America. Feeding America is the nation's largest domestic hunger relief organization. Did you know that over 50 million people are at risk of hunger here in the United States as a result of COVID-19? At Feeding America, I oversee health and nutrition. Part of my role is partnering with diverse organizations like many here today, so everyone has the opportunity to lead a healthy, food-secure life. It is my hope that you are all staying safe and healthy during these times. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Citizens Awards recognize the most innovative and impactful corporate citizenship programs. Not only have I had the privilege of judging this year's competition, today I am here to present the award for the Best Health and Wellness Program. The Citizen Award for this category is dedicated to a single strategic initiative focused on health and wellness. Eligible initiatives could focus on either global or domestic topics like workplace wellness, community wellness, nutrition and obesity prevention, food security, disease prevention, and improved access to healthcare services. There were 3 exceptional finalists: the ExxonMobil Foundation, Takeda, and Walgreens. Let's take a look at a short video to see them in action.
The finalists for the 2020 Best Health and Wellness Program Award are ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil has engaged in both workplace and charitable initiatives in the fight against malaria. Over the past 20 years, grants to support research and partners have reached more than $170 million, making the company one of the largest non-pharmaceutical corporate donors battling the disease. In 2018 and 2019, ExxonMobil helped frontline partners deliver 470,000 bed nets, train 110,000 health workers, and reach nearly 5 million people directly impacted by the risk of malaria. Takeda. In partnership with Microsoft and Eurordis Rare Diseases Europe, Takeda established the Global Commission to End the Diagnostic Odyssey for Children with a Rare Disease, made up of advocates, researchers, physicians, and technologists. The Global Commission launched cutting-edge technology pilot projects, equipping frontline providers with tools for diagnosis, referral, and reimagining the genetic consultation. The Global Commission is also launching a campaign to empower parents to work with their physicians to discuss rare disease. Walgreens. Walgreens, in partnership with the UN Foundation, donates 1 life-saving vaccine for every immunization issued in store. The Walgreens Get a Shot, Give a Shot program grew from an annual donation of 3 million vaccines to 11 million vaccines, equal to a value of $2.6 million. The program has issued 50 million measles and polio vaccines to children, with the goal of 100 million vaccine donations by 2024.
Wow. You must admit those are pretty remarkable programs that demonstrate how the private sector can directly be engaged in improving community health. Hats off to our finalists. Hi, my name is Ron Getzel. I'm a senior director at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health and also vice president at IBM Watson Health. Much of my career and research has focused on what companies can do to improve the health and well-being of their workers to create an internal culture of health. Most recently, my work has focused on what the business community can do to support public health professionals to improve the health of communities, the external culture of health. So over the past several weeks, my team at Johns Hopkins has organized focus groups with business and public health leaders, including Dr. Lawrence Bodish. And we asked these leaders, what can the business community do right now and in the months ahead to support a rebuilding of an effective public health infrastructure in light of COVID-19 and its aftermath? Our work is supported by the de Beaumont Foundation in Bethesda, Maryland, underway right now. So be on the lookout for a report with the working title, 7 Ways that Businesses Can Align with Public Health for Bold Action and Innovation. Stay tuned. So back to our award ceremony. I'm so excited to see all the 3 finalists as great examples of ongoing corporate engagement and community health. But now, the moment you've all been waiting for, and the winner of the Best Health and Wellness Program Award is Walgreens. And let's hear it from Walgreens team about their acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. It's Alec here from Walgreens, and I'm truly honoured to accept this award on behalf of all my colleagues, all the pharmacists and people who work in the pharmacies. I think, as Chi said in the previous segment, real essential workers, and it's great to get this recognition for wellness as well. Also, I want to thank all of the patients who helped to donate to this programme, and also importantly, I want to thank the UN Foundation for their great partnership. It's been 7 years and 60 million vaccinations, measles and polio, and it's just been a great partnership. And the work they do around the world is truly remarkable to help communities, even when this pandemic is gone. And fingers crossed, they'll be gone soon. They'll continue their amazing work, around the world. Also, really importantly, we're going to try and do more. We want to go further. We want to do 100 million vaccinations by the year 2024. That's a goal and a commitment that we make together with our partners. I also want to thank you, the US Chamber of Commerce and Foundation, for recognising this impactful work. Again, we're so privileged and proud to be able to work with our partners to get this done. So with that, I want to pass on now to Martha Rabor, who's Executive Director of the UN Foundation's Shot at Life campaign. Martha, it's been a fantastic journey with your foundation. We're really proud of the work that we have done together. We couldn't have done it without you, for sure. And thank you for your partnership, and thank you for all you do in this work.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Alex. It's an honor to stand with you virtually and accept this award on behalf of the UN Foundation. The Get a Shot, Give a Shot partnership, saves lives. And I think it really shows the potential for global change when businesses like Walgreens take action and make commitments to the Sustainable Development Goals, and in this case, commitments to helping protect children around the world. Thanks to this unique program, Walgreens customers get to make a triple impact. So it's global and local. They protect themselves, they get vaccinated, they're protecting those in their community, and then through this program, they're helping protect a child around the world. And I think if this current pandemic has shown us anything, it's the importance of vaccines, right? Vaccines are the most important public health intervention, probably next to nothing except clean water. So I just want to say that this program that helps ensure children, no matter where they're born, get a chance at a healthy shot at life is so important. And the UN Foundation is committed to continuing our work with you to protect children everywhere, to reach 100 million doses. That's just an incredible commitment, Alex. I want to thank you again, 100 million doses by 2024. And I want to thank the US Chamber of Commerce Foundation for recognizing this partnership, and I hope it will inspire others. Thank you.
There's a lot that goes into a name. What's more important is what's behind it. At DSM, we rely on a lot of people in a lot of places to do what they do best, which makes a difference. So we leveraged our material science expertise with global customers like General Motors to produce ventilators, and partnered with others to produce protective medical gowns. We worked diligently to donate face shields, produce hand sanitizer, distribute immunity-boosting vitamins, and support those on the front lines of this pandemic. We put safety first to keep our plants running, so farmers and grocery stores had the critical ingredients they needed to keep shelves stocked. Because it's the sum of our efforts, especially in times of uncertainty, that truly define who we are. So, we thank our employees, community and corporate partners who help to define what we set out to achieve each day.
Hi, it's a real honor to be here facilitating this panel today. This topic of supporting the front line is one that's very important to us at FedEx. We have 500,000 team members around the world who are on the front lines, delivering medical supplies and household items. And we're starting to deliver holiday gifts on top of all of that. And then very soon, vaccines. So it's very important to us that we look at how we can support these team members. And as I was looking across the names of the other companies at this conference and those on this panel today, I was just really struck by how many companies and industries have employees who are really truly keeping the world moving during this time in ways that many of us probably haven't even realized if we haven't stopped to think about it. And so supporting them is really just one of the most important things that we can be doing right now. So to talk more about that with me today, I'm joined by this very esteemed panel. First, Melissa Broats. She is president of Abbott Fund and the chief marketing and communications officer for Abbott. Nancy Lamb is president of Dow Company Foundation and the director of global citizenship for Dow. And then Hugh Welsh, the General Counsel, Secretary, and President of DSM North America. Melissa, Nancy, Hugh, thank you for joining me here today. And I know we've got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm just going to jump right in with our first question, which is, since this pandemic and the lockdowns began, this term of frontline workers or essential workers, it's really developed to encompass this large number of people who must still report to work despite the pandemic and the concerns around the world about their health. So who are these frontline workers for each of your companies that you are supporting? And tell us a little bit about how you're doing that. And Nancy, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jenny. I'm really glad to be here. And thanks to all our frontline workers. You have made such a tremendous difference, and we are grateful. So I am very proud to say that Team Dow rallied right from the start of this pandemic. To give you a little context about our frontline workers, we have about 14,000 of them out of our 36,000 employee population. So we are a global material science provider. At the top of our ambition is innovation, it's our customers, it's inclusion, and sustainability. We actually manufacture raw materials that go into 99% of the products that are essential, that are needed during this pandemic. Things like disposable gloves, light gowns, masks, respirators, cleaning solutions, disinfectant. And so it became essential for us, and we were named an essential business right from the start, to keep operating safely. So every day, and this has been consistent since March, we've had those 14,000 employees come to work, adhere to our pretty stringent state safety procedures, and our operations are still going full steam ahead. Let me tell you, though, about some of the key actions that Dow has taken. First, we have shifted some of our manufacturing assets to actually make hand sanitizer. We don't make hand sanitizer. We make the raw materials, but we actually don't, that's not one of the products that we produce. So we stopped producing other products to make hand sanitizer and get more out to the public and into our healthcare system. We also designed new face shields, and we did that in concert, right, with other companies. And then we shared that open source design publicly. Because again, we couldn't make them fast enough. We needed more people to start making them because they were so important to our frontline workers in the healthcare industry. We also designed with Whirlpool and Reynolds personal respirators. And we actually accelerated from design through development to production in about 7 weeks. So working across sectors with multiple businesses and companies to make that happen. We also partnered with other companies to make medical isolation gowns. And then we donated things like hydrogen peroxide, as well as packaging meals, tens of thousands of meals to others around the Dow world because they were in need, right, to our vulnerable populations.
Our foundation also gave $3.7 million, and that was distributed across the Dow world, so in all of our major countries.
That's great. That's amazing work. Thank you. Melissa, why don't you tell us about Abbott?
Sure. As hopefully most of you know, we're a healthcare company, and so the front lines for us during this time have really been those frontline healthcare workers. And as the pandemic has evolved, certainly other essential industries as well. From the very first, we really focused on frontline healthcare workers. In fact, our initial ID Now rapid test distribution strategy was aimed to support frontline workers so we could keep them on the job and get those who were affected out and quarantined. In addition, we've donated $23 million across the globe to really help frontline workers around the world. And a few of the things that work has done include our work with Direct Relief to support 25 federally funded health centers here in the hardest hit U.S. states, which, that funding is helping community centers that serve predominantly Black and Latino populations by strengthening screening, testing, and triage. In partnership with CARE, we're helping train and support frontline workers in countries like Afghanistan, Colombia, India, Uganda. In Canada, Colombia, Poland, and the UK, as well as the US, we've donated our continuous glucose monitoring system, Freestyle Libre, for use in hospitals so that they could remotely monitor patients and save on PPE and save healthcare worker exposure during that time. And in Africa, we're partnering with the African Federation for Emergency Medicine to provide virtual trainings on COVID-19 care to more than 2,000 healthcare and frontline workers. So those are a few things that we're doing. Again, we focus primarily on healthcare frontline workers, but have evolved that as time's gone on.
Fantastic. And Hugh, tell us about DSM.
I'm happy to do so. So, when the pandemic first struck, our initial reaction, like I think everybody, was what do we have to do to keep all of our employees safe? And so, like most companies, we sent what we would consider to be non-essential, although they hate to hear that, workers to work from home. And those that were working in our operating plants, making nutritional ingredients and food ingredients, they were the essential frontline workers that we needed to double down on protecting. And I think the company did a good job at the outset, sort of pre-staging PPE before the pandemic hit the US. And so we learned a lot from our experiences in China and Europe that it was going to be pretty hard to find N95 and surgical masks. And gratefully, we had them all here when the pandemic first came to the United States, and we were able to distribute them to our 38 sites around the US. It was important to keep those sites up and operating because if they shut down, in about 2 weeks, there'd be no food on store shelves. So we provide the ingredients that go into beverages or animal protein or packaged goods or soups. And so we were very, very essential in keeping sort of that logistical supply chain all the way to the store shelf in line. That was not always easy for governors and other state regulators to understand. And so we also had to spend a lot of time helping our government officials understand how supply chains work, understanding how logistics work, and getting that up and running. We worked very hard to keep those essential employees healthy and safe. We started a campaign called Optimize Your Immunity. Being a big nutrition company, we understand the power of nutrition. And so we began to ship our own nutritional products to our different manufacturing sites to be distributed to the employees and their families. I mean, some of them are here. They're called Mix Me sachets. You just pour them in water, drink them down. You get all the essential nutrients you need to stay healthy and improve your immunity. But what we learned soon after was we had maybe a little more than we needed. And I went and I donated some masks to like the local police department where our headquarters office is, put it up on Twitter. The next day we were overwhelmed with requests from frontline workers, from nurses, from hospitals, from law enforcement, from veterans homes who couldn't get their hands on the PPE they needed to keep their own employees safe. And so we started a campaign right away, going to visit these facilities and sharing all of the surplus, and we're talking tens of thousands of N95 masks, with those who needed them. We began to also make face shields for other organizations, and those that aren't in the nutrition or food business in our company pivoted their manufacturing processes away from, saying, making resins to making hand sanitizer, or away from making engineering plastics for electronics to making engineering plastics for ventilators. And so it's been an interesting experience. At the end of the day, though, I think that it all worked for us because we trusted the guys and ladies on the shop floor. That we trusted them to keep each other healthy, to keep their colleagues healthy, to come to us with ideas on how to do that better. And it was a tremendous learning experience, I think, for the senior leadership of the company as to how much you can accomplish when you trust.
Absolutely. And all three of you have talked a little bit about the importance of covering, first and foremost, the safety of your employees and those basic needs of your employees and the communities around you. But what about innovation during this time? We've also seen just tremendous, just jumps in innovation. What have you found is working? What is not working? And Melissa, we'll start with you this time.
Well, at Abbott, we like to say that we were built for moments like this pandemic, although we hope we don't see another one like it. We've long been an infectious disease leader. We invented the first HIV test. And so we have a lot of in-house scientific know-how. So when COVID hit, we assembled 4 R&D teams to come at the virus from a number of different angles, because we knew that different types of testing would be needed in this kind of a pandemic. And really, our scientists took what would normally take years and brought it down to a month or a little more than a month for the various tests that we actually developed. And that just took 24/7 know-how. I would add that innovation, though, in a time like this that doesn't have scale, really is kind of useless, right? So one of the things that we did was invested hundreds of millions into a couple of new manufacturing facilities to be able to make our rapid tests at scale. And so, so far, I think we've provided through the end of over 200 million tests around the globe, 80 million here in the US. And I think that one of the things to really note here is, innovation is critical. We need the innovation, but you also need the scale in a pandemic. And so without going into too many details, there were lots of challenges along the way, and what you would normally have is a few years compressed down to a month for the scientific side and then just a few months for the manufacturing side. It's a Herculean effort.
It sure is. Hugh, what about you?
Yeah, I could say that we tried a few things with respect to bringing together consortiums of companies and organizations to develop new innovation and ideas, and that didn't necessarily work all that well. And I think part of the challenge there was you can't operate with that speed. And being at a distance, as we all are today, it becomes much more difficult to collaborate. There's many areas where I think we were successful, and I'll just focus on one in the interest of time. You may see studies out there that talk about vitamin D, in that folks who have low vitamin D levels are much more susceptible to COVID-19, and if they get it, they have much worse outcomes. I think that there's a recent Spanish study that showed that 83% of the people with COVID-19 were vitamin D deficient. The challenge is it's very difficult to get enough vitamin D through your food. You can find some in egg yolks and fatty fish. And this time of year for all of us, except for me, a little red, it's very difficult to get the vitamin D you need from being outside. The sun is at the wrong angle. It's getting cold out. And so being a big nutrition company, we said, we can figure this out. And we developed a form of vitamin D. We'll call it Ampli-D. It doesn't really have a fancy name yet. That is 25-hydroxy vitamin D3. It's the type of vitamin D that's circulating in your bloodstream today. When you get a vitamin D test, that's what they're testing for. This can raise your vitamin D levels in a matter of a couple of weeks versus 6 months if you supplement with ordinary vitamin D3. This is one of those sort of, I think, step change innovations at speed and potential scale that we need to tackle this pandemic. If we can get a product like this out to the tens of millions of people that probably need it, both the elderly especially and people of color who don't absorb as much sunlight, I think we can make a material difference. And we're working hard on that. And that's I think, an innovation that would take us years to do in ordinary times, but with the catalyst of urgency, we've gotten it up and off the ground very quickly.
That's fascinating. Really, really interesting. Nancy, what about you? Nancy, you're on mute.
Of course I was. Sorry, that was bound to happen. Dow has a stellar research and development organization, and it is around the Dow world. And, with R&D, our researchers, and right in your companies too, they step into the lab and they're ready to try new things, right? You try new things and that didn't work, and then you try something else and maybe that sticks, or you tweak a little here. So we are used to solving real world challenges in our labs. And that's really what we did. Our plastics organization stepped up. They quickly mobilized a global team, and that's the team that created these new medical isolation gowns, these face shields with other companies, these new, the personal respirator system. That was something that, I haven't seen from other companies as well. So our innovation really continued and shined through during this pandemic. The other thing we did is we were getting requests from all over the world. I mean, hundreds of requests on a weekly basis. And so we created an intake process. How do we manage these requests, and how do we distribute? How do we make those decisions? It shouldn't be up to us, right, on who gets the sanitizer and who gets the gloves and who gets the masks. So we worked with healthcare organizations and universities and our key internal technical experts on how best to address that and how to deliver. It got down to the point where one member of our team actually put some hand sanitizer in the back of his pickup truck and drove it down to U of M to their hospital. So it was all hands on deck, but innovation certainly shone through, even down to the truck example.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to see if we have any questions from the audience. But my next question is around diversity. And frontline workers are a racially diverse group. And we know that COVID-19 has hit Black and Latino or Hispanic workers particularly hard. So how is your company addressing this topic or advising workers on this? And Nancy, we'll go back to you for that one.
All right, thank you. We're doing a couple different things. First, I mentioned at the very beginning that inclusion is at the top of our ambition. We have something we call Dow ACTS, and ACTS stands for Advocacy, Community, and Talent. We have a global strategy on how to address racial injustice, and we have allocated millions of dollars to achieve that. COVID related, we looked across our communities and looked across the world, our most vulnerable populations, our underrepresented minorities, to determine what are the greatest needs in these communities. And working with our global network within Dow, we quickly realized virtual learning is not the same for everyone. There are communities and populations that do not have access to internet. They do not have the equipment that they need, even if they did have access to the internet. They don't have a Chromebook or a laptop, or they would need to either go over to a friend's or go sit in the school parking lot in order to connect. So we provided grants across our Dow regions to schools and nonprofits where we knew they could allocate those funds to help buy the equipment, the hotspots, the internet connections that would help those students and those families connect to allow learning to continue. And then just one other small example, but we did this around the world, is providing, packaged meals and, just necessities, cleaning supplies to those that really needed it the most. So yeah, we looked at those populations and definitely wanted to make an impact.
Hugh?
Yeah, 2020 is an interesting year. I think it's largely defined by the pandemic, but not the pandemic alone. We had a very heated presidential election, and across the country, we had a lot of issues with respect to race and social unrest. And, all of that just got amplified. All of the stress, all of the anxiety, all of the isolation that employees felt is amplified because many of them are at home. They're afraid of the virus. They're being inundated by media and social media posts around some of the racial and social issues. And that, to me, all came to a head Memorial Day weekend. It was after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, where everybody was watching on TV what was happening. And knowing our employees like I do, I knew that this was something that I had to say something about. And so I sent them all a letter Monday morning. And it was a very probably ham-handed, but very authentic letter about how I felt, what I thought, and trying to express some empathy on what the experience must be like for others, to create an environment where maybe there was some safety in having a conversation around these issues amongst colleagues in the workplace. I think historically, we all work for big multinational companies. We know a lot of these issues, these difficult issues, are left at the threshold of the corporate door anytime anybody comes to work. But that doesn't allow everybody in the company to bring their whole selves to work every day. And I think we needed that now more than ever. And so as a consequence of that letter, I actually got hundreds and hundreds of emails back from our employees who were grateful in some respects for being seen and heard for the first time, from others who did not like at all the idea that I was raising issues like this in the workplace. But I think it served its purpose. It served as the basis to foster a conversation about things more than just the P&L or what goes on in the corporate social responsibility group, about what's really affecting all of our lives every day. And I think the takeaway when we move into 2021 will be, we're going to have to give people permission and a safe space to have these conversations in the workplace, or we're going to continue to have divisiveness and a lack of inclusion, and diversity in the company will suffer as a consequence. So I go into the next year very hopeful, coming out of a year that was very challenging.
Couldn't agree more. Melissa?
We internally, we've been having lots of conversations. At Abbott Diversity, we have a very diverse business model. We've valued diversity, but we know we're not perfect. And so we've had an ongoing conversation from the start about how we can be better. The other thing, our purpose of helping people is one that really motivates our employees. And so, we heard a lot from our employees about, can we do more in the communities? We know we help underserved communities, but can we do even more? And so, one of the things my team and I are doing is really giving small grants so we can learn and so we can continue to have even bigger impact. One thing that we've seen more recently, actually, is the University of California, San Francisco. They conducted a study in the Latino community with our Binax Now rapid test and found that it was a very useful tool in reducing the spread of the virus, because a lot of these families, they live in multiple families live in one dwelling, and they need to go to work because they're essential workers. And so, we're both looking at what we can do better internally, and at the same time, looking to have even bigger impact with our products and our sustainability work in our communities.
Thank you. We have time for one question coming up on the end. Are there any questions in the chat? Don't see any. So I will, I guess, just ask that if each of you could maybe leave us with, oh, wait, here comes a question. Let me go ahead and ask this one. Given the current political climate, can you provide insight on any challenges as a result? Any of you want to take that?
I'll take it very briefly. It's it is a tremendous challenge in any organization, especially organizations that are diverse in terms of geography, diverse in terms of education of employees, diverse in terms of nationality. And I think it goes without saying that we're living in one of the most divisive times politically ever. And and this is my expression of personal opinion, the media, the social media, like to keep us angry, like to keep us anxious. If they keep us angry and anxious, we keep tuning in and they keep selling advertising. And so for me, the biggest challenge is having conversations with employees to help them understand that they need to think for themselves, that it's okay to have a difference of opinion from a colleague without holding that colleague, as lesser than. And to do that by setting examples at the senior leadership level of the company. I could tell you, I do write to all of our employees every Friday morning, and we talk a little bit more than just coronavirus. A lot of it has to do with politics. A lot of it has to do with social issues. Not all of it is universally well received. But until we enable these types of conversations, between adults in a stable manner, this political divisiveness is only going to continue not only in our country, but creep into our organizations. And I don't think that we can afford that as a country or an organization.
Hey, Jenny, this is Nancy. I'd like to kind of pile on to that. Early on in COVID was a separator. And later on, it became a convener of business, of industry, of thought, innovation, charity. And that's what we have to keep at the forefront. 2020 threw a lot at us. We're not done yet, right? We had lots of hurricanes, and our corporate headquarters is in Midland, Michigan, and we had a major flood happen. So, the issues kept surfacing, and we rose to the occasion, right? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But we need to keep that collaborative and innovative spirit. We need to keep breaking down the walls across sectors and across industry to continue to innovate and to make a difference. I got to say, I'm so proud to work for a company like Dow because, right, they made things happen very quickly. They broke down walls and they created new partners, and they helped people in need when they needed it the most. And we made things we've never made before. And, for a revenue generating company to put some things aside and to keep operating safely and to keep people working, it was sobering, and it still is. Proud to work there. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I think that's just a common theme across all of these corporations today is everyone is just looking for ways to support our employees, to support our communities, and to help end this health crisis as soon as we can. Right. So thank you all for joining me. It's been a very inspiring conversation, and I look forward to hearing more from each of your companies. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Thanks to the U.S. Chamber Foundation, Mark, Natalie, and the team there. My name is Jeff Senney. I'm the responsible business leader for PwC. And I just have some brief remarks before our panel discussion. As our previous panel discussed, COVID has shone a light on the systemic racism and inequities across America and across the world. COVID didn't create those, but it certainly exacerbated them. And we at PwC have taken a number of steps to address this through our responsible business leadership activities and 6 actions that we're taking as a firm, as well as issuing our first ever transparency report of our diversity and inclusion efforts and performance as a firm. But the conversation that we're about to have is around allyship. And for me, this is the tangible expression of how diversity and inclusion comes to life on the day-to-day level, within our organizations. And I think it's especially important for people like me, white men, because we have to identify first our privilege. And this is easier said than done, because I don't think for many of us it felt easy getting to the positions that we find ourselves in. But I have to recognize that being white provides me privilege. Being a man provides me privilege. Being a leader within a company provides me privilege. And so what I need to do is leverage those to provide support for others. And there's a number of ways that we can do this, or I try to do this. I support other people's voices in conversations. I try to implement a Rooney Rule within our hiring processes for my team. I try to look at and call out if somebody is being mansplained or other acts of microaggression, and seek areas where my privilege is diminished, where I might be not have that privilege and might have a different experience that will help me maintain and empathy. And there's a 3-step process that I recommend for people to think about who are thinking about allyship or inclusive leadership. One is to reflect on yourself, your privilege, and the system around you, and how it provides or supports that privilege in ways you can respond. And that's the second step, that respond. That's about acting to support others, identifying others whose voices might be marginalized, who might not be having a privileged experience, and how you can support them. And last, engage. How do you build a culture of belonging company-wide, but within your team, within the sphere of influence that you have? And this gets to the whole concept of inclusive leadership and how we can all have play a role and demystify this concept of diversity and inclusion to be something that we can all act on day to day, making our companies stronger, making ourselves stronger, and making the communities in which we operate stronger. So I'll leave it there and pass it to the panel. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Let me start by thanking our friends at U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation for delivering what is already shaping up to be yet another informative and successful Corporate Citizenship Conference. My name is Ron Estrada. I'm the head of government relations and corporate social responsibility at Univision Communications, the leading U.S. Hispanic media company. I will be moderating today's session on committing to equity. As we all know, the racial unrest and turmoil in 2020 has really catapulted us forward in terms of achieving racial equity. And it's clear building and maintaining a racial equity culture requires a completely new approach of addressing the situation. Largely, staff of color should not carry all the political risk of speaking up and carrying the flag of change. That said, why should the business community be concerned? Or the better question, how should businesses react? Here are a few points to ponder. When today's children are in their prime working years, people of color will represent half the total population and more than half of the working age population. Thus, a well-prepared, diverse workforce is critical to the success of U.S. businesses. Today's efforts require an entirely new approach, and some companies have already stepped up. For example, PayPal will invest $530 million to advance racial equity and inclusion. Apple committed $100 million to a new racial justice initiative. We just heard from Nancy Lam about Dow's significant contribution as well. And soon you'll hear from executives at Prudential and PNC details of their efforts in driving change on racial equity. And here at Univision, we're finding new ways to foster an open dialogue in our community via town halls, special programming, and expanding our community partnerships. We're also focusing internally. One example was an all-staff survey in which one of the things we heard is that there's a real need for more diversity at the top of the company. Well, just last week, we announced the appointment of four Hispanic independent directors. They're going to join the new Univision board. But obviously, one action alone will not fix the situation. And yes, it starts at the board and CEO level. However, it will require day-to-day commitment from the top and bottom to advance this needed transformation to a just and equitable workspace. Now, let's explore some transformative examples today with Prudential Financial and PNC. It's my pleasure to introduce Veronica Arani Charkala, Vice President, Culture, Diversity and Engagement, Inclusive Solutions at Prudential Financial, and Marsha Jones, Executive Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at PNC. I invite you all to visit the event website to view their impressive bios and accomplishments. But for right now, Marsha and Ronnie, thank you both for joining us. Let's jump right into it, okay?
Great. Thank you for having me.
All right. So, great. So, Marsha, let's start with you. And Ronnie, I'm going to ask you the same question. So, broadly speaking, what is the role of companies in driving change on racial equity?
Well, as we've been discussing, Ronnie, we're living in truly unprecedented times, and we have the convergence of a global health crisis, economic decline, and one of the most significant civil rights movements of our time. And we believe at PNC, the corporations have a responsibility to act and an opportunity to respond in a way that drives meaningful and sustainable change for those who need it most. We think that it's a time to examine the role the companies play in affecting positive change for stakeholders, to assess their strengths, how they can play a part in driving racial equity and social injustice for employees and their communities. And that's going to look different for every single company. So just as we know, every corporation's journey of inclusion is different, we know that every company's reaction is going to be different. And we heard from the previous panel how each of their individual companies is also impacting the current experiences in a very unique way. So as a financial institution, PNC recognizes the opportunity to put our capital to work in the community, to drive innovation through products as well as services. We're approaching our community development banking efforts in a more deliberate focus on the African American community. We're expanding our established employee volunteerism program to include qualifying social justice and economic empowerment nonprofits. And we're also recognizing that there are opportunities for improvements as well. So committing to an intensified focus on the recruitment, retention, and advancement of Black talent, and a more comprehensive and sustained effort to create a more inclusive culture at PNC.
Great. Thank you, Marsha. Ronnie, I'm going to ask you the same question again as, broadly speaking, what is the role of companies in driving change on racial equity?
Yeah, thank you, Ron. And similar to Marsha, you'll hear a lot of similarities there. We think at Prudential that companies do have a very large role that they could be playing to drive the change. And simply stated, is pivoting to a new form of capitalism that is good for all stakeholders, so that they can become a force for the greater good. And it's not a brand new theory. It's been around for a couple of years, and some companies have already moved forward with that work. But the idea really rejects the notion that companies are only in business for a profit, but instead that they can take action on behalf of a broad set of stakeholders, like their communities, like their vendors, in addition to their employees and their shareholders, which are the traditional stakeholders that they're interested in. But it just broadens out the value so that they can then focus on business and society value at the same time, not one in place of the other. And that really, what that means is then you really have a focus on your internal policies. Some of the things Marsha already mentioned, how do you create an inclusive culture that has really meaningful behavioral changes? How you do your product design, is it accessible? Who are you advocating for? How are you investing in your community? These are all things that will be part of stakeholder capitalism. And incidentally, this is not, the public is actually unified, which is an interesting statement to even say when we talk about division, but the public is unified in this desire. There was a study done by Just Capital. They go out and poll Americans, and this was about 9,000. And even though it was not this year, it still stands true. And basically what they found is that The public is really unified in their desire that companies do both business good and social good. And they're coming at it from both being a consumer and also a potential future applicant. So the statistic here, which I thought I would share, is that 76% of Americans said when considering accepting a job, that they would opt to work for a company that's more just, even if it meant them getting a pay cut, even up to about 20% of a pay cut. So that's pretty significant if you're thinking about that in terms of how it impacts society. And then also 78% of Americans said that they had taken some sort of action to show their support for companies who do have this positive behavior. So more than half of them, that action that they took was directly buying the company's products or increasing the products that they buy from a company. So these are really great proof points as to why this idea of stakeholder capitalism is really, really important for companies to stay relevant going forward.
Yep, Ronnie, thank you for sharing those stats. Those are very critical and very eye-opening for the business community. And I'm wondering too if that same kind of survey questionnaire was asked today, if we would see those numbers go even higher than where they were, because 78% is high.
That's a great point, Ron. They actually said in the study that they've been doing the study for a number of years, starting in 2015, and every single year those numbers jump.
Thanks again for sharing that. Let me pivot over to Marcia. Marcia, you've touched on some of the company's external kind of efforts in promoting racial equity, but can you highlight some for our viewers here, some kind of key external activities, activations that you've seen successfully been working on that are promoting racial equity?
So certainly in June, we announced more than $1 billion to help systemic racism and support economic empowerment of Black Americans and low and moderate income communities. The majority of this commitment is actually going to be serviced through our community development banking, but also includes philanthropic component and an extension of our employee volunteerism program. And I would say that our community development banking has had a stellar record of 40 years of consistent, outstanding ranking in terms of our CRA efforts. So to Ronnie's point earlier, this is not necessarily something that is new necessarily to the organization. It's something that diversity and inclusion is actually one of our core values and has been over the last 25 years. And what we are essentially doing is bringing those core values to play in the current environment we are in. Our commitment to D&I, as I mentioned, is not new, and we've embraced an inclusive culture in order for us to not only have a better company, but also to be able to be a better employer, a better neighbor, and a better investor. Essential to the core business of PNC's prosperity will be the proportion to how we're able to enhance those low and moderate income communities that Ronnie referred to earlier, those communities where our employees and our customers work and where we serve. And we recognize the fact that that there's a lot that has to be done, that we need to be able to partner with many corporations in our various markets in order to be able to make this happen. So some considerations, I would say, that we have had over the last couple of years might include the following. We've broadened our definition of diversity and inclusion to go beyond race, ethnicity, and other factors. So our definition of diversity is the differences that make each of our 53,000 employees unique. And when we think about inclusion, we want to be able to create an environment where everyone is not necessarily just seen, but where their opinion is actually heard and then is actually able to be acted on. We have introduced a number of resources to be able to help our employees as well as our managers to be able to work on these particular focuses that we have. And also, obviously, as many organizations have, naturally, we've trained our managers as well as our employees on unconscious bias and micro behaviors, which we know are really key in order to be able to assist in creating these things. So what happens is that when our employees create that inclusive environment internally, it helps us to be able to then demonstrate that inclusive environment as we develop relationships with our external customers and our communities. And thereby we show up as an organization that actually cares and actually listens and then actually acts on what it is that we are hearing as needs of those various communities, which help us to be able to grow as an organization.
Impressive. But I just jotted down a nice point here that I just wanted to underscore this. So basically, you're not just looking for employees or talent to fit within your culture. You're changing the company's culture to fit with this diverse population. And I think that right there is
absolutely. Because what we believe is, and actually it's been led by our CEO, Bill Demchak, who when he began his tenure, indicated the fact that his vision for the organization is that managers of people not only deliver business results, but also are able to create diverse and talented teams, because from his own personal experience, he has actually seen how diverse and talented teams actually help to be able to innovate and can actually be more competitive. And so he is really living out this vision. And we, over the last several years, have been on this journey of creating this inclusive culture where we recognize, and have for a long time, the changing demographics of the country and the need for us to be able to be competitive by not only welcoming that changing demographic as part of the workforce, and also to be able to create relationships with those diverse customers, because that's actually how we're going to become that much more profitable.
excellent. Thank you. So Ronnie, how is the drive for equity changing how you do business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we definitely know that, and we've known we've been in this business a long time. We've known that it is a moral imperative. So we always say that. We never want to forget that. But there has been significant changes on the business side and what's driving that. We talked a little bit about it, but there's global demographics that are playing, right? They're shifting and becoming increasingly more diverse. So you have to have products and solutions and people who associates and those who can think in a very diverse way in order to match that diversity that we're seeing globally. One thing we do know is that millennials right now are already representing 30% of the population, and they are the most diverse generation in U.S. history. 44% of them are ethnic and racial minorities. So there's no way you can stay relevant if you're not aware of that and you're shifting and building in that way. In addition, though, not just demographics, customer attitudes are shifting as well. So D&I strategies are critically important. So to customers, as we mentioned earlier. So then that means they're critical to your future growth as well. So I have another statistic actually that I got from Accenture. 42% of customers are saying that they would pay a premium, right? Of up to about 5% for a retailer or a customer who has a visible commitment to I&D, like the ones Marcia is mentioning and the ones that we're focused on at Prudential. But conversely, if they don't see that and a failure to promote that really can do some serious damage to your brand around that and a loss of market share. So what we're doing, my role specifically, my team is culture, diversity, engagement, as you mentioned, and Marcia mentioned this earlier as well. We're really focused on creating that inclusive culture within the company. Exactly as Marcia mentioned, it's not just the words, but a feeling of belonging and really meaningful behavior shifts. And companies who focus on that, we know it improves their employee loyalty and retention and productivity. So that directly impacts your customers. So one of the things that we're doing, which I think has been really insightful, I'm responsible within my work for the strategy across all of our business resource groups. We have 8 of those, and they represent different underrepresented groups within the firm. And we're using that group, which by their very nature are very diverse. We're using that group to create a consumer insights council. So we're doing something that's a little bit more systemic, so the rest of the enterprise can tap into them in a very nimble way to get some consumer insights, whether they're launching a product or there's a marketing piece and they're checking for marketing voice and tone or an experience. It could be a digital experience, looking at a website. So we're at the early stages, but we have had some early successes in using this Consumer Insights Council, and that's going to feed into kind of the way we do business going forward. In addition, there's a benefit there because the members of our BRGs have a great talent exposure as part of that, and that keeps them engaged. So they're having access to business leaders that they might not have access to and helping them solve a problem that's really not in their day-to-day kind of function. So there's really a double benefit there. And so there's several things that we're doing to pivot to ensure that we're taking that that view. We're also in the middle of some transformative strategies. And one of the things that we're asking any future initiative to have is an equity lens. So we need to apply an equity lens to any new, whether it's a strategy within your business alone, or it could be externally facing. We are asking all of our leaders to take a view of that through an equity lens, and really making sure that they understand the impact of their initiatives to not only our vendors, our diverse suppliers, to our employees, to the product development, to the distribution. So it's really been quite transformative just in thinking alone.
Well, that's you touched on a lot of good points here. I just want to validate the Consumer Insight Council and the use of internal kind of groups and gatherings and committees. They're very helpful, and as we kind of look at racial equity. And one of the things I'm sure you get this all the time in your title, culture, diversity and engagement, inclusive solutions. I love it. That's great. I hope to see more of that in other titles. We have time for I believe one more question each here, and I'd like to go back to you, Marcia. Again, PNC, you just shared the just extraordinary amount, and I jotted it down. I want to make sure I got this right. It's billion with a B, right? Was the commitment here? You put a significant amount of capital to work here in the communities that you serve. How is COVID-19 impacting that deployment of that capital?
So I would say that as an organization, one of the things, and I think we've alluded to it before, that particularly on several of the other panels, that the organization has had to really pivot, if you would, towards how we are focused on just reacting, if you would, to COVID, how we go about in terms of the need, for example, of implementing our PPP, okay, in terms of loan, the ability of us to be able to pull our teams together, to be able to execute on the input of all the loans that needed to take place, as well as now, servicing of those particular loans. And so one of the things that we are most proud of, as many organizations are, but we're most proud of how our employees were able to actually pivot during that period of time to be able to do whatever was necessary in order to be able to be successful in terms of the amount of loans that we actually had. But in addition to that, it's also a question of how our organizations, our employee business resource groups, our line of business councils, our regional councils, et cetera, which are so dependent on face-to-face communication and support, were able to pivot to a virtual kind of an environment. And so as we are thinking about creating that kind of an innovative environment where we're able to touch, if you would, each of our employees, to be able to recognize that in this kind of COVID environment where everyone is at home, where we're now working virtually, whereas opposed to being able to see each other face to face and have that human contact, we had to be able to be creative as to how you create that kind of a semblance of that impact, so that we can in fact continue to be as effective connecting with one another as best we can. And so it has enabled us, as well as our leaders within our various diversity initiatives, to be able to exercise that innovation in order to be able to help them, as well as to be able to then think about how do you creatively assist our customers, right, in terms of being successful in this kind of a COVID environment. So it helps be able to demonstrate all of the skills that we want to be able to develop within our employees. It enabled us to actually put that into action. And we're very, very pleased with the way that we've been able to respond.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Marcia. So Ronnie, I know we had just a couple minutes left here. We talked a lot about the external factors and partnerships and community-facing activations and such. But if you could touch on, for those that, that are in a company right now, and for your colleagues that are inside Prudential, what are you doing to ensure equal opportunities for the talent that you have in there, inside?
Okay, inside the organization. Okay, and there's a number of initiatives. So Prudential's been committed both externally and internally, as Marcia mentioned earlier, to talent and other ways of skilling for the future. And probably since 1978, I think around that time, Prudential's Foundation has contributed about over $920 million to help eliminate some of those barriers to financial and social mobility for those underserved populations. In addition to that, we made about $180 million commitment to connect opportunity youth skills training programs and employment of those individuals through 2025. So that's kind of a little bit on the external side. And we have a whole host of other partnerships. We have about 40 other partners that we work with to obtain not only talent for the company, but also to skill that talent and to work with partners to build their capacity. But on the inside, there's a number of initiatives also that Prudential is focused on, because one of the things we heard very loud and clear from our employees is that it's not just a hiring issue, right? I mean, hiring is extremely important and you really have to do it well. But touching back on that inclusion. So one of the things we heard, we had done over 100 listening sessions with 7,000 employees this summer. And one of the things we heard loud and clear was to really make sure we're also focusing on the retention and mobility of our diverse talent within the company. And we're doing that through a number of ways. One of the things that we're working on internally, in addition to some of the things I mentioned externally, is mentorship programs, both formal, informal, for our diverse associates. Some of them are sponsored through our business resource groups. So for those who are listening who have business resource groups, this is a great place to start if you haven't. As a matter of fact, our Black Leadership Forum just really leads the way in our company around a mentoring program that they have that's very successful. I actually had the privilege of being a coach for that program this year. And so we're going to take the elements of that program, which is very successful, and sort of try to leverage those components to all of our other BRGs so that we can have a little bit more activity going on across all of them. The other thing that we're doing is we have a program called Transformational Leadership. And that's a program, it's in its 5th year. We actually had graduation this week. I was very excited. It's about a 9-month program. It focuses in on developing the skills of multicultural women. And it's just a terrific program. We have an outside partner, Blue Circle, that we work with to bring that program. It's 100% online. So we were very fortunate that we didn't have to skip a beat this year with all the challenges that we had. And that program increased this year over last year by about 65% because it's such a successful program. And in addition, something that Marcia mentioned earlier, we also have had a focus on inclusion training. I think most companies have, but I think the point on that is that, there's a lot of folks who say that the training itself is not enough, and I would agree. So we're approaching it as a journey and something that everyone's on, and they're on a different place in that journey. So we have to keep reinforcing it. So everything from how to be an effective ally and an upstander in the moment, techniques where you can kind of like de-escalate situations and really step up and talk about things in a way that's non-confrontational. So all of those trainings kind of build off of each other, and then we have some reinforcement of those trainings, and of course, additional trainings for leaders who, are really well-intended that might need a little bit more help in understanding where bias is showing up in the workplace. So it really is a multi-pronged strategy to make sure that we're looking after our highly talented, diverse associates and ensuring that they have a good experience and that they feel like they belong here. I think with every company, we always want to do more. So again, it's a journey that we're on, and we look forward to making a lot more progress on that this year.
Fabulous. That's great work. Well, it looks like we're at our time right now, and for us to conclude the session. We covered a lot of ground, heard a lot of great points, a lot of great sharing of good programs and information. And I hope we were able to solve some questions for our viewers today. I'm sure we were. I'd like to thank both Ronnie and Marcia, as well as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation staff for making this session happen. And I invite you all to keep the conversation going via social media with #BusinessSolves. Thank you again, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Carolyn Cawley, and I'm president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. It's great to be with you all today. That was a really interesting panel that we just wrapped up, and we've got some more in store for you this afternoon. At the Foundation, our mission is to educate the public on how business does well, does good, and prepares for the future. And that is just really coming together in this conference today. It's one of the biggest conferences in the country and on the topic. And so a big hats off to my colleagues at the Corporate Citizenship Center for putting this together. I think with more than 1,000 people logged on, if you care about corporate citizenship, this is the place to be today. You know, at the Foundation, we come to work every day, or I guess it's these days we log on every day, because we believe in the power of business as a problem solver and as a trusted partner, as a change agent and a community leader. And it's that word that I just used, trust, that might be the most decisive and important word that we'll talk about today. It's what underpins confidence and civility and prosperity. We heard that earlier today from Larry Fink in his opening interview as well. So it's a big theme for us here at the Foundation. I'm really thrilled today to be joined by Joe Ukazoglu. He's the CEO of Deloitte US, and we're going to talk about trust in business. You know, as CEO of Deloitte US, what that means is that Joe oversees the largest professional services organization in the country. More than 100,000 people, really smart people who are bringing their best thinking and bias for action to give it advice and leadership to other companies and organizations like ours today. Joe's been a remarkable leader at Deloitte US, and under his leadership, Deloitte has really taken the charge to solve some of the biggest challenges facing our communities. He's really using Deloitte's power as a force for good, and it's made Deloitte one of the most trusted organizations in the country and in the world. So it's great to have him here today, not in the middle of just one crisis and not even two, but 3 or more crises happening at one time. I'm eager to dig into this conversation. So welcome.
Carolyn, it's wonderful to be here. Privileged to be a part of this wonderful event. And all of us at Deloitte are certainly very proud to be at the forefront of demonstrating how business can, in fact, be a source of good in our communities.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about at this conference. Now, Joe, I want to start with a broad question about trust, and then we'll drill down a little bit to employees and consumers. But just broadly, why is trust so important, and what does it mean to you as a leader?
Trust right now is unfortunately at a deficit in society. This is a polarizing time. We are in need of institutions and leaders that can bring us together. And it's very clear that people are looking more and more to their employer for functions that one might have historically looked to the government, the media, a multitude of other institutions. And so as a result, being able to instill trust is core to leading a company these days. And I actually view it as the price of admission to getting anything done. If you use COVID as an example, it was imperative that as business leaders that we were a trusted source of credible information for our people, and that we were forthright throughout about the gravity of the situation, the potential impact on the economy, on our customers, and laying that foundation and building that credibility is what has then allowed us to have a more aspirational conversation around some of the shifts that are taking place that actually will drive a lot of good in society. But you can't have that conversation. You can't share an aspirational vision unless you've established trust and credibility to begin with.
Well, that's so interesting. I think that, when we think about the pandemic, and someone said early on that we've had, 10 years of change in, at that point, 6 or 8 weeks when this person said that, just everything has been accelerated. And if we're to have hope of getting people on board and maintaining optimism toward a future, it really does come down to trust. I want to talk specifically about employees and internally at a company under leadership like yours. As we're shifting to, more remote work and work from home and different technologies, are they barriers to building trust, or how do we build trust differently with employees in this kind of environment?
I don't know that I'd say it's a barrier. I'd say that the approach has had to evolve as we've moved through the various phases. So if I think back to the earliest days of the pandemic and many organizations shifting to a primarily virtual work model, that was a huge opportunity to demonstrate to all of our people that we are putting their health and their safety first, whether through remote work or for those organizations where individuals do need to be in person, investing in the right type of infrastructure to prioritize safety. And the fact that employees saw us as business leaders do that, that is a big reason why employee trust in their companies is up. Now, over the past few months, I think we've moved to what I'll call the resilience phase, where as the situation has dragged on, as the stresses of being isolated and unable to be together with our colleagues and with our clients in the ways that many of us have traditionally thrived on, that's taken a toll. It's taken a toll on well-being. There are certainly mental health challenges. And again, we've had the opportunity to step up and support our people through that very difficult time. And when I look forward, and I actually am more and more confident that there is a forward, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, when we get past COVID, I think we're going to have yet another opportunity to demonstrate to our employees that we are not simply reverting back to the old way, but that there's a lot of learnings that have come out of this. There's a lot of benefits in terms of what's worked relative to flexibility that we can combine in a hybrid model to allow some of that to continue, while at the same time allowing our people where it matters, where it's impactful, to get back together in person with each other, to get back together with clients, and to demonstrate frankly, a much more exciting and aspirational hybrid future of work than what people are accustomed to historically. And I think that's exciting for our people.
Well, your excitement is really infectious. I'm really glad to hear that you're optimistic. There's probably nothing more I crave than being back together with colleagues, and we know that's going to look different. Let's turn for a minute to consumers and customers. You've talked a lot about the leadership involved in bringing an organization to a new level, but what about consumer confidence and consumer trust, and how that translates into buying behaviors, or being a consumer? How does trust work in that equation?
Well, you certainly saw a drop-off in the springtime on into the summer as the brunt of the pandemic took hold. But even there was not sort of one uniform reaction across the entirety of the economy. There was a bifurcation. So those things that are most in-person human interaction centric took the biggest drop. But there are other areas that saw a boom. So those companies that have invested in digital, that have been able to engage with customers using technology, actually saw a very significant increase in demand. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all story. And as I look at where we're at today and where we're likely headed going forward, I would say that, once again, there's sort of two different tales here. There's the short term and there's the long term. In the short term, if we are realistic and credible, going back to that theme of trust, we all have to acknowledge that we're probably in for a difficult few months here. And some of the behaviors that we saw early in the pandemic may recur as authorities implement new restrictions on mobility and gatherings. But that is the short term. Over the medium term, I do see a light at the end of the tunnel. I do see some real positive developments here between the overhang of people wondering how it would be to conduct an election in a virtual model with the logistical challenges and being able to do that relatively smoothly, and then followed by some of the significant scientific breakthroughs that we have seen over the past week or so. There is a growing optimism that over the months of 2021, we will gradually get to a much better place. And I actually think that's going to result in an increase in confidence and an increase in optimism, because it at least allows for a platform upon which to plan and some greater level of certainty here.
Certainty is the twin of trust, I think, right? We've talked about building back better, let's say, and I'm in complete agreement that we all hope to get to a more optimistic day of trust in the economy and in employers. I think we also all agree that we need to do a better job of creating benefits and positive outcomes for everyone, right? Not just a few people. And, at the foundation, something that the reason we get out of bed is because we believe that a job is one of the most important things to a family, to a community, and that we need to create more opportunities for more people. Can you talk about, in the new, more optimistic environment and community, what can we be doing to make sure that we're more inclusive and getting more people on the path to opportunity?
This is essential, and it really lies at the heart of the movement to embrace stakeholder capitalism. And so you're seeing businesses come together with governments to really lay out a platform around investing in education, investing in infrastructure. I would commend the Chamber as well as you at the Foundation for doing a lot of the groundwork to build up a bipartisan support for what are common sense policies to make sure that we're lifting up all communities here. And, when we talk about infrastructure, it's not just physical infrastructure. There's a huge element of ensuring equitable access to technology, of ensuring the consistency of access to broadband. You're seeing that in an education context right now with virtual school, certainly relevant to making certain that a lot of the tech-oriented jobs of tomorrow are accessible to all communities. And again, I'm pretty proud of, when I look at the efforts of, Deloitte and many other organizations like ours that are coming together, partnering with governments, focused on upskilling and making certain that we actually do have an inclusive prosperity coming out of this.
It's so important. Thank you for everything that Deloitte does to create kind of that optimism and engagement with not only your employees and your clients, but for the communities that you work in as well. I think that you're a great role model. I know that we're out of time, but let me just ask you with a quick yes or no question. If we're sitting here a year from now, assuming things are different, what would make you most proud to see in your company or in the economy?
We'll be in a much better place in terms of having controlled the pandemic by that point in time. And you're seeing that in terms of the optimism reflected in the financial markets. When you look at the past couple of weeks between the relatively smooth election coupled with the scientific advances, that is being priced in and resulting in a much greater level of confidence that if you look a year out, that we will be in a far better place than we are today.
Well, I hope so, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again in a year, and we'll revisit this conversation.
I will look forward to it. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Joe.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark DeCourcy, the Senior Vice President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and I lead the Chamber's Corporate Citizenship Center. I am so thrilled today to be joined by Catherine Hernandez-Blades. Catherine is the Senior Vice President and Chief ESG and Communications Officer for AFLAC. In this role, she has a unique position to view holistically how AFLAC takes all stakeholders into consideration when the company is faced with making major decisions. This macro perspective is more important than ever during a crisis like the pandemic. And as the title of this session suggests, crisis has a way of revealing the character of a company. When the pandemic started, AFLAC stepped up to address the needs of all of its stakeholders, specifically using ESG as a guide. This is a great example of crisis management done right. So let's get started. Catherine, AFLAC has a long history of CSR engagement since the founding of the company in 1955. Your CEO, Dan Amos, famously said, "You take care of your people, and they'll take care of the company." How has this ethos come to fruition in the midst of the pandemic?
Great question, Mark, and thank you, and thank the U.S. Chamber so much for having AFLAC and me here today. Yes, what you mentioned is a philosophy that has served us very well for the past 65 years. I think the way we handled COVID was a great example. We looked holistically at all of our stakeholders, particularly at the way the pandemic impacted them. And the way it impacts people is in three areas: their physical, mental, and financial health. So specifically focusing on your question, we looked at our W-2 employees first, obviously, and we were able, for their safety and security, to send 98% of our workforce home within a 2-week period with tech bundles and stipends for internet service providers. And then we looked at our sales force of 30,000 independent sales agents, and they work on commission only. So what we were able to do was not only provide them with information about the government assistance programs, we actually created our own no interest loan program for those 30,000 1099s to keep them whole through the pandemic. And of course, it was all done within IRS guidelines, but it was a wonderful way to take care of our people first.
Well, Catherine, that is really terrific. A no-interest loan program, 1099s, is really unique, and I have not heard of that before. Congratulations. Tell us how preparation for this was key to Aflac's response.
Well, that's a great point, Mark, because you cannot build culture in a crisis. You have to leverage what's already there. And remember, in a crisis, it's not an opportunity to build character, but in a crisis, character is certainly revealed. And just like a person is a blend of character and competence in the workplace, so must a company be in the marketplace.
So, Catherine, how have you grown your CSR during the pandemic?
Well, I would like to share with you the most rewarding project of my career. I'd love to introduce the audience to my special Aflac duck. Let's roll tape.
Well, Catherine, that is truly a remarkable effort, and we love the video. Having been part of a family that has dealt with blood disorders, I know how much it means to have external support from all sources during that time, during those visits to the clinics and the hospital. So I think on behalf of every family who's experienced that, thank you, kudos to you all and Aflac for making such a major difference.
Well, thank you very much. Just on background, Aflac has had a 25-year commitment to the eradication of pediatric cancer. And during that time, we've donated almost $150 million to the research and treatment of childhood cancers. As a matter of fact, the Aflac Cancer Center in Atlanta, Georgia, is the #1 provider of services to children with sickle cell in the country, and they are also a top 10 pediatric cancer hospital in the U.S. We're very, very proud of that.
And we're proud of you. Thank you again. Let's switch gears for a minute, Catherine. 2020 has revealed a number of racial inequities. Can you tell us more about Aflac's Enhanced Equity Inclusion Program?
Absolutely. On a personal note, this issue of racial injustice is at the forefront of the American consciousness, frankly, in a way that it has never been in my lifetime. And we personally, I feel, have a moral imperative to get this right. After so many years of such deep tragedy, we cannot squander this opportunity. From AFLAC's perspective, gosh, we have been at the forefront of the civil rights movement from the 1960s through today, and we manifest our efforts and our commitment to social justice in a handful of ways. First is donations. The second is closing educational disparities. And what we mean by that is that we do that through our commitment to the United Negro College Fund, our donations there, our donations to HBCUs like Morehouse. I'm very, very proud of that. We also employ very fair labor practices among our internal employees, providing everyone with opportunity. And speaking of economic opportunity, we focus on creating that through our diverse supply chain efforts. And then finally, the fifth bucket, I'll call it, is our advocacy work. We work with the Congressional Black Caucus to ensure that true statutory reform happens. As a matter of fact, AFLAC was instrumental in getting the Georgia hate crimes bill passed. So it's not just what you say, it's what you do. And AFLAC really, really walks the talk.
Well, I'll hear more, Catherine, on that. And we've spent a large part of this conversation talking about the S in ESG. As Chief ESG Officer at AFLAC, can you spend a few minutes talking about the E in your environmental efforts, but also the G and how you focus on good corporate governance?
Absolutely. Well, it's about two things. You have to have programming so that you have something to disclose. The G is the easy part, right? We all know what an SEC violation looks like and how to avoid one. The E and the S are difficult because there really isn't a tremendous amount of standardization, some would say, if any, in regard to disclosures. So what we did when we embarked on this journey was we went to our three largest shareholders, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, and we asked them, what makes sense for you? What are you looking for? And then we looked internally to determine what we could make work for us. And that resulted in reporting out the E in alignment with TCFD. As a matter of fact, we filed our first TCFD report this year, and SASB, which is the sustainability version of FASB, which most finance people are very, very familiar with. And then on the S side, for the last 6 years, we've actually been reporting out our CSR report in alignment with UN SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals by the UN, and GRI, which is the Global Reporting Initiative. But it's not just about disclosures, it's also about how you make those disclosures. When you look at these aggregators like MSCI, Sustainalytics, ISS, they have AI trolling the internet in order to pick up the information that you've publicly disclosed. So we chose to disclose our information in the form of an internet hub, which allows our algorithms to readily talk to the AI of the aggregator. So when you look at our hub at esg.aflac.com, not only is it beautiful, and it really, really is, not only is the content outstanding, and it really, really is, but the beauty of the hub is what you don't see. It's that piece on the back end that, again, allows the AI ready access to our information. Is it perfect? Probably not, but is it smart? You bet.
Well, thank you, Catherine. And I would recommend for the viewers to go check out AFLAC's ESG Hub. I think we can all learn a little bit from a leader in the space like AFLAC. Catherine, that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your unique perspective. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic has challenged us all in immeasurable ways, and it's so insightful to hear how AFLAC has so successfully tackled these issues.
Well, thank you, Mark. And again, thank you to the audience and thank you to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine.
Welcome. My name is Carolyn Gray, Chief Executive Officer of the Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce and Chamber Foundation, where we engage, educate, and empower California's Central Valley small business community. We are working to develop the region's inclusive, vibrant economy through our work with small businesses owned by women and people of color. As a judge of the 2020 Citizens Awards, I was particularly moved by the number and quality of community improvement programs that were submitted. The selections were very difficult because of that. It is critical that companies embrace the communities in which they operate, and that is as important today as it is to build for our collective futures. The 2020 Best Community Improvement Program finalists are City Foundation, CSX, and T. Rowe Price. Let's learn a little bit more about their work as we wait for the big winner reveal.
The finalists for the 2020 Best Community Improvement Program Award are City Foundation. In 2014, the City Foundation and the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund, CFE Fund, created Summer Jobs Connect to ensure that youth have early career experiences, connections, and skills needed to succeed. Summer Jobs Connect works with cities to integrate financial education and access to financial products and services into existing municipal summer youth employment programs. Since launch, Summer Jobs Connect has supported over 13,500 young people with a career experience. CSX. CSX created Pride in Service in 2018 as a company-wide commitment to honor its employee values of supporting military personnel, veterans, and first responders. With the onset of COVID-19, CSX expanded this program to include healthcare workers on the front lines. Pride in Service has supported more than 350,000 service heroes and thousands more military families. CSX has gifted more than $1.25 million in supplies to first responders and residents of cities hard hit by coronavirus. T. Rowe Price. Following Baltimore's 2015 civil unrest, the T. Rowe Price Foundation made a $1.3 million multi-year commitment to address racial inequity, food insecurity, and community leadership. The foundation has increased funding through partnerships to advance equity and support of minority-led organizations by 150% and lessened the amount of communities that qualified as food deserts. As more organizations examine their role in social justice and community advancement, the T. Rowe Price Foundation has been tapped by corporate peers to share learnings from the firm's community approach in Baltimore.
Thank you, Tara Lynn. What amazing contributions these corporations are making to make a real difference in their communities. My name is Lawrence Bowdish. I'm the Senior Director for Research and Issue Networks for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and I'm very excited to open this envelope to see who the judges are selected as this year's Best Community Improvement Program winner. We'll recycle that, don't worry. Thank you. And the winner of the 2020 Best Community Improvement Program is, this is serious, T. Rowe Price. Let's hear from the team on their acceptance.
Well, thank you, Lawrence. I think it's always great to start by giving thanks and recognizing some amazing people. So first, I'd like to begin by giving thanks to Mark and the whole Chamber of Commerce family for this amazing honor. I am personally such a huge fan of the community work of City and CSX, and so it's such a thrill to have been in a cohort with them. I want to recognize the amazing folks at T. Rowe Price. The work myself and my team is fortunate enough to do each and every day is fueled by the ethos and values of this amazing company. It's the reason my team and I spend so much time focusing on the how of our social good efforts. And so I'm truly thankful to lock arms with T. Rowe Price's leadership and our amazing associates to figure out how we can use all the nooks and crannies of our company to help advance our communities. For our associates, this honor means a great deal to them, and I want to thank them for what they do on behalf of our communities. I also want to recognize the amazing people of our foundation and our corporate social responsibility teams, including the trustees of the foundation. Each day they dig in and get really dirty with the goal of achieving meaningful social change in our communities. Finally, I want to thank the many folks in our communities we are so fortunate to partner with. I know I speak for many at T. Rowe Price and how privileged we are to be able to join hands with our brothers and sisters in community, and we are so thankful that they have continually reached back to us and led us to their amazing visions. I want to thank them for allowing us into their communities, for leading us, and we hope that we have entered their space as good listeners, as servants to their own self-determinations, and we have had the bedside manner that has honored them and their values, and that we have earned and maintained their trust each and every day. We thank you, and we know this honor would not be possible without you. Thank you, everybody.
Well, if you're as excited as I am to learn more about the T. Rowe Price program, please join us at the AMA link, which you can find at the top of the screen. I'm guessing it's probably about here, or over here. I'm sure some of my team will put it in the chat box. Congrats again to T. Rowe Price and Walgreens for their Citizens Award recognition, and to Citi Foundation and FedEx for being inducted into the Corporate Citizenship Hall of Fame today. Today, we talked about how the private sector has made a significant and positive impact this year through frontline activation, support efforts, and leadership through partnership. Our team here at the foundation has been so lucky to be able to work with all of these speakers to make a difference in our world this year. But that's not all we need. Archimedes once said, "Give me a long enough lever and a fulcrum to place it on, and I can move the world." And today we've been lucky enough to hear about how the private sector is constructing that long lever. But if you're still listening to me right now, you're the fulcrum that we need to put it on. Without you in the audience, we wouldn't have the foundation necessary to make an impact. So I want to thank you especially for participating today. This conversation is only the start. Over the next couple of days, we'll hear more about what now and what next as we shift our focus towards the future. We are not here to tell you how this story ends. We're here to tell you how it begins. We hope to see you tomorrow. We start early tomorrow at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time with a special session in conjunction with our colleagues over at Global Entrepreneur Week on the importance of corporate incubation. And then the full program begins at 1 p.m. with a Citizens Award presentation on the Best Economic Opportunity and Empowerment Award. Thanks. Have a great evening. We'll see you over in the AMA in a few moments, or we'll see you tomorrow when we restart. Thanks again.